Hey everybody, it's Wednesday night. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Welcome to the Hang Up right here on the line. First, thanks to everybody who came out to the Bayou Country Exotics show this past weekend. Arden and I were there. We were set up selling ball pythons and geckos and stuff, but it was really cool because we got a chance to meet probably like 20 or 25 different fans. I think we drew more individuals into the show than several others did, but it was great, including a lovely lady who gifted Arden a jumping spider. So we've added a jumping spider to our collection and traded a couple snakes for a blue-eyed Lucy breeder male that we needed. So we've got that going on. And then I get back home. I've got, by the way, next weekend, there may or may not be a show, but I won't be on it. I have to travel to St. Louis for a pre-surgery little appointment next Wednesday, and I just won't be back in time to do the show. I'll be flying back at the exact time that the show is supposed to air. But that's all right, because we've got a lot to talk about today, and that Louisiana has become the first state to require the display of the Ten Commandments in classrooms. House Bill 71 was signed into law today by Governor Jeff Landry, who, when he signed it, or around the time he signed it, I guess, called it one of his favorites. And so here's a law, which I'll go over briefly. You're going to be hearing a lot about this, but here's a law that blatantly violates the Constitution and essentially mandates from the government, at least to some degree, deference to a Judeo-Christian trope. And so the law itself requires the Ten Commandments to be displayed in a large, easily readable font in every classroom, in every school that receives any state funding from kindergarten through university level. Landry said, quote, "If you want to respect the rule of law, you got to start from the original law given, which was Moses. He got his commandments from God." No, he didn't, Governor. That's simply not true. It's not a fact of history. It is your sincerely held, I presume, religious belief. But that's not the origin of the law. It's not the origin of the law in the United States. The law of the United States is the Constitution, and it is not based on or reliant on or contingent on what you think Moses received from the God you prefer. Meanwhile, there are plenty of students who will be attending schools in Louisiana who are Christian, who are Jewish, who are atheist, who are Satanists, who are Buddhists, Hindu, Muslim, Jain, Sikh, or any of other countless religions that don't actually adhere to the Ten Commandments that Louisiana is going to require in school, and don't believe the false claim that this is the original law, or that this is what we should found our laws on, or should be a foundation for the laws. This is absolutely, undeniably, an instantiation of a particular Christian or Jewish doctrine into public schools that are supposed to be protected from this by the First Amendment of the Constitution. People who are supporting the law are trying to rely on the 2022 Supreme Court decision in Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, where a high school football coach who had been fired was given his job back in a controversy surrounding prayer on the football field. This U.S. Supreme Court, I think it was the U.S. Supreme Court. Yes. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the coach's prayers amounted to private speech. Now, this is already a bullshit decision that the Supreme Court absolutely got wrong, because they are overlooking what happens when you have a team of, let's say, 25 athletes, and they're not all part of the same religion, and you force them to stand out there and participate in a prayer to a God that they don't believe in. And the concern was, well, what's the penalty? It's not going to hurt them to stand out there. Yes, it's not going to hurt them, but what it does is it ostracizes them. If you're the one out there that's not with your eyes closed and head bowed, that becomes obvious to, well, mostly the rest of us didn't close our eyes. But also, you have this de facto prayer for one particular religious group. If we're going to allow it, then we need to allow every single person to do their own prayer to their own deity if they so choose. And so if you've got 20 kids on the team and a coach and a couple of assistant coaches, after the coach gets done praying to Jesus, we can just go right down the line and have prayers to anybody and everybody that we feel like we want to pray to. This isn't just an encroachment on people's rights. It's not about what's offensive. It's not about whether or not you're stuck standing there looking silly while other people are trying to cheat by getting their God to help them win. That's not what it's about. It's about the First Amendment, and it's about individual civil liberties, about you shouldn't have to sit there and have your time wasted in deference to somebody else's religious beliefs. If your religion says you don't get to read these books, cool, but you don't get to prohibit other people from reading those books. If your religion says you don't get to marry a dude, cool, but you don't get to prevent other people from marrying a dude. If your religion says you need to pray 5 times a day, cool, but you don't get to force anybody else to pray 5 times a day. If your religion says that you shouldn't have an abortion, fine, but you don't get to impose that on anybody else. The Supreme Court got this one wrong, but even with the Supreme Court decision from the Kennedy Bremerton case in 22, they ruled that the coach's prayers amounted to private speech. There is no private speech at all to rely on in having the government force you to put up a poster listing 10 of 613 rules of a particular version of a Judeo-Christian understanding of a God. That is not private speech. That is absolutely the government of Louisiana dictating an encroachment on the Establishment Clause to every school that gets any public funds from the government of Louisiana. It's absolutely wild. We knew stuff like this was going to happen. Somebody already commented on Twitter basically saying that Justice Alito is standing by for the inevitable appeal. The ACLU is suing, as is the ACLU of Louisiana, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And I fully expect there will be other organizations jumping in to participate in lawsuits on this as well. This is if this does not get struck down, this is the end of church-state separation, I think. And you can call it what you want. I've called it church-state separation most of my life. I have a friend who's a lawyer who wishes that I and everybody else would refer to it as separation of religion and government. And I understand and agree with her reasoning for that. And I will remind people of that when I'm talking about it, that what we're talking about is the separation of religion and government, and hope that this is enough for people to actually understand. But the colloquial understanding of church-state separation is just there, so we kind of run with it by default. But yes, we're talking about the separation of religion and government, and Louisiana's governor just today tried to instantiate Christianity into the public schools. He said this was his favorite law that he signed, and that if you want to respect the rule of law, you got to start with the original law, which was given to Moses. That is factually wrong, Governor. But even if the original law was given to Moses, that is not what U.S. law is about. It's weird when we're talking about civil liberties. What we hear over and over again is, well, the facts don't care about your feelings. Fuck your feelings. Fuck your feelings. We don't care about your feelings. We don't care about your feelings. Your feelings are awful. We're not here about feelings. We're here about facts, 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 facts. Well, the facts are that this law is blatantly in violation of the Constitution. It is blatantly an instantiation of Christianity or Judaism or Judeo-Christianity or some version of that by the state into classrooms. I saw, some of you may have seen, I'm not going to do too much on this because if you haven't seen the Daily Show from Monday where John Oliver went after the right for basically continuing to lie about crime. They flat out said they've been hyping up this crime wave as a distraction, because let's face it, Fox News is just a political mouthpiece at this point. And oh, look, we're not quite as crazy as OAN. Yes, you are. Yeah, you are. And so when the statistics came out that showed that for the first quarter of 2024 compared to the first quarter of 2023, violent crime is down over 15%, murders are down over 26%, rapes are down over 25%, aggravated assaults are down over 12%, robberies are down over 17%, property crimes down over 15%. All of these things are crime rates where there's been a decline. So what do you see with the pundits on the news network? Oh, well, it doesn't feel that way. Well, Americans don't feel that way. But do you feel safer? Do you feel like crime is down? So all of a sudden, as John pointed out, I'm not the first to note it, all of a sudden, fuck those facts. We're going to go with feelings. And they're going to run pieces where they tend to amp up a lie about crime statistics in order to create fear. And as Jon Stewart was pointing out on Monday, the reason people may not feel like crime's going down is because Fox is fucking lying, as is the entirety of the right. These people are liars. And without digging in too far on Israel-Palestine crap and people who are like, oh, I won't vote for Biden because he's supportive of Israel and everything. First of all, the Republicans and the Democrats are stupidly blindly loyal to Israel. Trump is one of the most pro-Israel presidents that we've had in recent memory. Biden has at least stood up to Netanyahu on a couple of different occasions, both when he was vice president of the United States and now as president. But there is no good solution on this. But if you think the two parties are just they're just the same, or I'm not going to vote for fascists or genocide worshipers or any of that crap, you're just not paying attention. You've bought into the propaganda. It's not even close as to which one of two individuals is going to become president of the United States, and it's not even close with regard to their personal character, with regard to their qualifications, with regard to their position on issues, as to what kind of fucking world we end up with. It's not even close. The facts don't care about your feelings, but I care about facts and I care about feelings. Because when we end up talking about feelings, if your feelings about the crime rate aren't in alignment with the facts, we need to know that so we can correct it. Similarly, there are people who think that the unemployment rate is at a 50-year high when it's at a near 50-year low. Fully half of people polled, their internal model of reality is the exact opposite of what is actually real and true. Their perception of the economy, based on how much they're paying for food or whatever else, is distantly divorced from the reality of the economy. Are there problems with the economy? Sure, yeah. Home interest rate's way too high right now. And it didn't budge when the Fed announced the new rate, or it didn't budge much. And that's a big problem. There's loads of problems. The question is, Trump or Biden, who's going to be able to fix it? Who's going to fix it the best? Who's going to do the best for us? And I, for one, am going to stick with the people who lie less, I guess. I mean, I hate to put it that way because I genuinely don't think this is necessarily a lesser of two evils thing. I think that it's, an evil and a non-evil that is imperfect. And the perfect is the enemy of the good. But I spent a lot of time thinking about facts and feelings. And by coincidence, I spent a good chunk of the day today working in the snake room and doing a lot of cleanup. I go through and spot clean different snakes, but also I redid the enclosures for 8, and I'll do 8 more, and then keep doing it in chunks of 8 over the next couple 3 or 4 days. Also, we're going to do a live stream on Epic Loot Exotics probably this weekend to do ultrasounds and in preparation for the next round of breeding. But when I'm doing stuff like that, I like to listen to shows. I like to listen to things that make me think and give me something to think about. And so today I was listening to a video that was just released by tonight's guest. Please join me in welcoming Paulogia. How you doing,
Hello.
Paul?
I'm doing well.
I
You
was
shouldn't listen to videos I make. That's a mistake.
no. I listened to a video that you just released because I had watched Satan's Guide to the Bible and had
Okay.
commented briefly. And today you released, or I think it was today, it showed up on my thing today,
Yep.
a video kind of with you and Satan going over some YouTube Christian apologists who are trying to, I guess, rehabilitate or say how bad, like they seem to want to say, ooh, look at this video about Satan's view of the Bible and all the stuff it gets wrong. And yet I did not hear any evidence-based argument from them to show where something was actually wrong. Was there some point? I know they skipped over some stuff and they didn't cover everything. Was there some point in there where they presented facts that actually rebutted something? Because I don't for a second think that everything in the Satan's take on the Bible was necessarily correct.
Right. Well, there's a few. The largely the tone of people opposing Satan's Guide to the Bible is on several fronts. One is they don't like the tone, which is fine. Okay, you don't like the tone, whatever.
They don't like my tone either.
Yeah. The other one is what I hear a lot is, well, we the highbrow Christians who are very intellectual about our beliefs, we know this. So this is a silly video telling us problems with the Bible we already know. The trouble with that, of course, so therefore this video shouldn't be made or no one should listen to it. The trouble is for someone like me, I went for decades in the pews sitting there not knowing these things. And then when
Mm.
I learned of the problems, I went to my pastors, I went to my Bible school teachers, and I said, what about this? Like, what about all these problems I'm learning? And like, no, shh, don't say those things loud, because those things, while we know them, we don't tell people, we don't talk about them from the pew or the pulpit, because that's going to cause unnecessary doubt and not everyone can handle it. So, Paul, welcome to the secret club now where we know about the problems of the Bible and we're just fine. That's another defense. The third problem that people seem to have with the, oh, now I've totally lost it. Anyway, those, no, there are, so I did actually present one thing in my video today where I think Satan kind of overstepped his bounds, and that was on the extent to which people doubt the empty tomb narrative. And actually, Satan even said, "Oh, even I merit sometimes." Like we had a scholar on who said, "You probably overstated this one thing in your hour and a half documentary." And to his credit, the documentary creator's credit, he said, "Yeah, okay, we should put that in. We should include that maybe I overstated something." So, but other than that, no, these were all absolutely problematic facts.
And there's some guys, some of the guys that were in this. I just noticed my camera's not centered. Some of the guys that were in this are people that I know, people I've debated, offering up their take
mm,
on this this pretty simple video, and it's like I enjoyed it when I watched it. I thought it was a really good kind of condensing of a number of things that you would hear from former believers, from atheists, from people who figured out that maybe what we've been taught about the Bible isn't necessarily accurate. And when you look at things from scholars like Israel Finkelstein and others about there is not, I wouldn't so that it's rare that I say, or that it's rare that I want to in the future say there's no evidence for,
mm,
because the first thing is, well, what about this testimony? Are you ignoring anecdotal
right.
testimonial evidence? And so tend to say, okay, there's not sufficient evidence for, or there's not good evidence for. And I want to kind of tweak it, because the truth is there are loads of claims, and there are plenty of people who feel that their religion is real and that it benefits them. Matter of fact, here in just a second, we're going to go to our first callers. I mean, they're still on the line, who says that you and I are wrong about Christianity, and that the proper understanding of it helps this person maintain their faith. So I'm interested in hearing that, and we'll be getting to that in just a moment. But I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm like, I can be a prick. That's easy. I don't want to ever be inaccurate or dishonest. And it's one of the
Right.
reasons why, like, I have some disagreements with some of my friends who are mythicists because I think they go too far in their assertions and that they can't necessarily defend. And that it would be much better to just say, hey, it's not like Christianity has demonstrated that Jesus even existed. This is just a de facto kind of, we accept this as a reasonable possibility, and then we just exclude the magic stuff until there's more evidence for it. But similarly, I don't like saying, oh, there's no evidence for
Mhm.
God. What it is that there's no good evidence that should convince anybody that a God exists. Um, and that's my assessment of the evidence that I've been presented with. And if somebody calls into the show with better evidence, um, I'm in. Like I'm not going to end up being. And people are like, "Oh, Matt, you've said before that even if you believe there's a God, you wouldn't worship him." Yes, that's true. And I would probably continue to do a show like this, explaining to you why the God I believe in is some immoral monster that I don't want anything to do with. I would still find a way to rebel against this. But I would absolutely believe and agree that he existed. But we can't even get, it's like going into the doctor's office and saying, hey, I don't feel good. What's wrong? I don't know. Okay. Where does it hurt? Um, it just kind of, yeah. All right. Well, we'll run some tests and well, all your levels seem to be normal on this. Yeah, but I'm just not feeling good. Well, um, and then you're just stuck. That's the position I'm in with God all the time. And yet I have friendly acquaintances, um, former debate opponents who I genuinely like and happy to talk with, who seem to look at me and just say, gosh, I don't understand why Matt can't see the obvious that there's a God. And I'm like, if it's obvious, how could any of us miss it? And I know asking you isn't going to fix it because you used to think it was obvious, just like I thought it was obvious. And now we're like,
Mhm.
hang on, it's not obvious. Where do we go if we're going to like? I genuinely I can't wait to engage with uh, some more theistic apologists to have good conversations. I hope I'm going to get Than on for some stuff. I'm reaching out to some other people um, to possibly do debate sort of events here. But I wait. Is Canada any better? Are we? Do you guys have any? Are you as fearful that church-state separation is going to just vanish in Canada tomorrow?
Not so much in Canada. The province where I used to live, Alberta, yes, perhaps it's kind of a mirror of Texas in its own way. But we're unfortunately the the bad company corrupts good character mantra kind of goes. I feel like US is rubbing off on Canada more and more over the last decade, and we're starting to get some of the um, polarization. We have five parties in our political system, but we're starting to get some of the rhetoric and the weird thing, and now people are starting to pass bills similar to proposing at least bills that are similar to this kind of thing. And in Canada, of course, the province I lived, there's a whole Catholic school system. Ken Ham's materials I had to go protest because it could be purchased for schools where I live. So better or worse, it's weird. There's a spectrum of problems, but Canada, we have our problems. I feel like we're better in some ways, but it's not perfect.
Somebody in chat said that Alberta and Saskatchewan are pretty hillbilly, and I'm like, hang on, let's not use hillbilly as a pejorative because I
Mm,
come from a family of hillbillies, and there are some really good secular redneck hillbillies. Don't
as do
just
I.
throw them all under the bus just because everybody with a potential twang in their voice or who might be a little bit rural, you start making assumptions about what they believe. You can find that you're massively wrong. But well, I tell you, since we got full lines and calls, if you're ready, I'm
Let's
ready
do
to
it.
jump in on calls.
Can't
All
wait.
right. We have Matthew on from Ohio who's here to explain why we're wrong about Christianity and what the proper understanding is how it's beneficial for him. So Matthew, you're on with Paul and Matt. How are you?
Hey guys, how's it going? Paul and Matt, I think I spoke with Paul on Sunday, and we had a really good, from what I understand, a really good conversation about you can't use a book to prove a book, and we kind of came to the conclusion of like, okay, the table. We used the analogy of a table, and I was like, okay, yeah, the table is what is the actual proof, not the book itself. So I appreciate that conversation. And Matt, we may have talked a couple of weeks back, and I was watching one of your shows, Matt, and how you said about Christianity. Someone says they don't sin anymore, and they were a little bit strange about the way they said it. But then you said something along the lines of, "Oh no, Christians continue to sin." And I think with Paul, we talked about that a little bit too, and it was like this expectation that that was the doctrine that Christians continue to sin. And it seemed like when I presented something different to you, you were at least surprised by that idea.
Are you saying that Christians stop sinning?
I'm saying that by the grace of God, that as a Christian grows, and this is the doctrine, that they can come to a point where they no longer sin.
Okay. I have no evidence, despite the fact that I was a Christian from 5 to like age 30. Never once met a Christian that didn't still sin.
Right.
I don't even know that it's possible given the list of potential sins. It's just the teaching was not that we are no longer sinning. It's that we are forgiven and blameless for our sin, but that you would have potentially different rewards in heaven. But if you're saying that, what Christian in the history of the world has reached a point where they no longer sin? And how do you know?
Well, right. Well, I would say people like Paul and stuff like that, but either whether or not that's the case, right? That's irrelevant to the doctrine that I'm explaining. Like the doctrine teaches that we are to be free from sin, and that we can be free from sin and no longer
that's
sin.
free from blame for sin. What is this doctrine?
No,
well, first of all,
I'm talking about practical sin.
Hang on.
Mm-hmm.
What is the doctrine you're talking about? What scripture is it based on? But more importantly, the question that I asked still stands. What Christian in history reached a point where they no longer sinned while they were alive?
I would assume it was Paul.
How do you know?
The way he spoke about winning the race and fighting the good fight, but like I said, I can't confirm that. But what I'm saying is that I don't know for 100% sure.
Cool.
But
is there anybody you know of? I need somebody we can verify.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, but if I may, I don't think that if there was even if there was somebody that wasn't able to do it, what I'm saying is that the doctrine of Christianity presents
I don't care.
That
if the doctrine of Christianity is that if you flap your wings hard enough, you can fly, then the only question I have to ask is, where's the demonstration of someone flapping their wings hard enough that they can fly? And if you're like, oh, I can't present that, then it doesn't matter what the doctrine is, does it?
Well, I think it does, because you said that the doctrine of Christianity taught that.
You're wrong. The doctrine claims something. The doctrine claims something, and I'm asking, how do you demonstrate that the doctrine is true? I don't care at all about any doctrine that can't be demonstrated to be true.
That's fair. I agree. But what I'm saying is that I think it can be demonstrated to be true. Not only that, I think
and demonstrate
when you
I asked you, Matthew, I asked you literally for a demonstration, and you provided Paul, and then when pushed on it, acknowledged that you could not use Paul as a demonstration, and that you're not sure that anybody would be a demonstration. So don't act like, oh, you think it can be demonstrated. I literally asked you for the demonstration. I'll ask again, what's the demonstration that this doctrine is true?
So I'm in a bit of a hard place, because I'm trying to explain to you, if you let me, that I'm saying that the doctrine itself is misunderstood first. That's what I'm trying to explain. The doctrine itself is misunderstood by you and Paul.
Is the doctrine, Matthew, is the doctrine that you're saying is true, that Christians can and do reach a point where they no longer sin?
Yes.
What is the demonstration that the doctrine is true? Don't tell me that I don't understand it. I just asked you for clarification, and you verified that I gave an accurate understanding of the doctrine. Now I'm asking you to demonstrate what is the demonstration that that doctrine is true.
Well, the best demonstration I can give is there are Christians out there that are growing in Christ and turning away from certain sins. And my understanding is that if they turn away from those sins, then they can also turn away from the sins that they still struggle with.
Matthew, do you think for a second that what you just said is in any way a demonstration that the doctrine is true?
Not fully. That's the best.
No.
I can give
Then why
saying.
is it? Then why is it when I asked you for a demonstration the doctrine is true, you just gave me one which you acknowledge doesn't demonstrate the doctrine is true? Do you have a way
I'm
to
sorry.
demonstrate?
I thought I made a caveat that it wasn't fully.
Do you? I don't care about caveats. I don't care about apologies, Matthew. Do you have a way to demonstrate that this doctrine is true? Yes or no?
Yes, I do.
Then do it. I've asked 2 or 3 times. What the fuck is taking so long to get the demonstration?
So from what I'm trying to explain is that I do have a way to demonstrate it, and I'm demonstrating it as
I'm going to mute you. I swear to the God that you think you're advocating for, if you dodge this one more time, I'll just move on to another caller. I'd like to actually have a discussion about this, but you have now claimed multiple times that you can in fact demonstrate that the doctrine that Christians can and do reach a point where they no longer sin is true. I've asked you multiple times for the demonstration. You have waved your hands around talking about how Paul and I don't understand it, waved your hands around about how you desperately need to finish explaining the doctrine to me, wave your hands around of here's the best demonstration I can get, and then acknowledge that that was not a demonstration of it. And now, even when I got you down to where we had to go to kindergarten levels of you going to answer a yes or no question, you said yes. I'm going to unmute you. When I do, I would like for you to present the demonstration that the doctrine you are defending, that Christians can and do reach a point where they no longer sin, is true. Please do that demonstration now.
If I may, I feel like you're not allowing me to explain.
I'm going to mute you again. When I unmute you, Matthew, if you do another little whiny bitch thing about how I'm not letting you talk, I won't mute you. I'll just hang up. I've repeatedly asked you for a demonstration. I don't know why it's so difficult for you to give the demonstration. Give the demonstration now, please.
Well, I feel like a demonstration it does not explain my point. So I guess you're going to have to hang up.
Okay. Paul, do you have any?
I would like for
you
Matthew
want to take a stab at this?
No, what I would like Matthew to do is look up Romans 7:22-24, where
Yes.
it says, "For in my
Yes.
inner being I delight in God's law, for I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. What a wretched man I am! Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death?" If I'm wearing my Christian hat, I just don't think, frankly, you understand the doctrine itself, and I think that you should workshop this maybe with some Christians, as opposed to Matt and I, who are not the arbiter of what is or is not correct Christian doctrine. We are more here to demonstrate once you've got it sorted in amongst yourselves. So I would encourage you to go look at that verse. But I thank you for your call.
So with Romans 7, that explanation of Paul, he says he is brought into captivity into the law of sin and death, correct? In verse 23?
Yeah, and he's still sinning. So you gave Paul as
Right.
your example of the person who might be closest, and he's still sinning.
Right. But can I finish? In Romans 8, it says there is now no more condemnation because he is now free from that law of sin and
That's
death.
no more. That's
So
no
he's
more condemnation. That's no more condemnation. That is not the same thing as no more sin. This is what I tried to explain the last time somebody pulled this nonsense and tried to pretend like I don't understand the doctrine. First of all, I don't care what the doctrine is. If you have a doctrine that's true and you can demonstrate it, I'll buy it. But you, Matthew, you don't have a doctrine that you can demonstrate is true. And what's worse is the Bible, where you're trying to point to it, doesn't support the doctrine you say it does. Romans 8, when it says there is therefore no more condemnation, means not that you don't sin, but that you are held blameless for your sin because of the Holy Spirit, not because of any act that you achieved or any possibility of becoming sinless. So while Paul and I both reject your claim of doctrine as if it's real and true and biblical, neither of us would say you're at all wrong if you could actually demonstrate that the doctrine is true, but you can't. You can't even cite when you go to verses, you cite things that contradict what your position is, and you present zero evidence that any Christian in the history of the world has entered a state where they have stopped sinning.
Okay, well, give me some time then. I'll come back when I have demonstration.
Take as much time as you need and don't call back until either God tells you what you need to say or you find the verse and the evidence that supports the doctrine, because I'm not going to stop asking for the evidence. I'm not trying to be a dick. It's just you want to come on here and say, here's what I believe is true. And all we're saying is, what's the justification for believing it's true? And you're like, I can't give one.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild. If we're going to say that Paul is the one that comes closest to becoming sinless, maybe that's true. Maybe of everyone in the history of the world, Paul has been the closest to sinless at some point later in his life. Problem is, how could you ever demonstrate that? You have no way to investigate his life. And Matthew right off the bat was like, well, if you read what Paul wrote, he's saying this. Well, I've listened to Trump speak. That doesn't mean what he says is true or accurate. I've been lied to by plenty of people. I've been in church with other Christians, with them trying to convince all the rest of us that they didn't do wrong when they absolutely did wrong. I know people who've been molested by deacons in a Baptist church. And if you just went by what those deacons said on Sunday when they're standing up and passing the offering plate and greeting everybody, you would not have a clue. See, this is the thing for Matthew and anybody else. You don't have access to somebody else's mind. This is why, in part, the Bible says things like, by their fruits you shall know them, which is also, it works for trees. It doesn't work for people. Bad people can do good things. There can be ministers leading people to a doctrine that is accepted, that is the orthodox view of that particular religion, who don't follow it in their private life. If you pretend like you know the inner thoughts and feelings of other human beings, you have now put yourself in God's place. If you think that you can determine that Paul counts as a true Christian, you are in conflict with the Bible, which says that nobody but God knows. For all we know, Paul may not have been a real Christian. Paul's name may not be in the book of life. If Christianity is real and true, and there's a book of life, maybe Paul's name's not in it. Maybe Paul was just a tool that God used to spread it, because that's something that I've heard can happen too. But I don't care.
Many will say to me on that day, in my name I drove out demons and performed many miracles, and I will say, away from me, evildoer, I never knew you.
Depart from me, for I never knew you.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where... Oh, go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say, it was Matthew based on my previous conversation with Matthew, I think what Matthew wants to argue, what he wanted to eventually get to, he wanted us to accept that first part and say, well, because there are perfect people, we should accept that Like that's his evidence that Christianity is true. That we would look to perfect people, but weirdly, like he couldn't even present this hypothetical perfect person that was going to be his evidence for the divine. So he's got a long road ahead of him.
Yeah. I mean, Romans 3, no one is righteous, no, not one. No one understands. No one seeks God. All have turned aside together. I know that at that point, Paul's lamenting about others, and that doesn't necessarily apply to no one. He's like, no one can, and it's hyperbole. But even that would already suggest, I don't know where. There's a lot of different Christian doctrines. There's a reason why there's 1,000 different denominations, or over 1,000 different denominations, that all say we're Christian, and they disagree on virtually every point of doctrine. And I'm happy to have people call in and say, here's the doctrine that I believe and why I think it's true. But when you assert that it's true, and I ask for the evidence for it and you can't present it, we got to move on. Because at that point, you're just saying, here's what I think's true. And that's cool. As a former Southern Baptist, like if I didn't mean to do the
rim shot randomly.
Here, I'll put my Jesus hat back on. As a former Southern Baptist, I didn't believe for a second that any Christian ever reached a state where they no longer sinned. I would fully accept that there were Christians who reached a state where they were less likely to sin. That this is what, being redeemed and being forgiven is what happens to you, so that you are no longer blamed for your past sins and for your future sins as well, apart from the potential unforgivable sin of apostasy. But that you would strive to be better out of love for Christ, but that you, because you are in a fallen world with a fallen mind, are going to keep failing. The goal isn't to be sinless, but to sin less, to make your sin less impactful. The notion of forgiveness is based on this notion of turning away from sin. That this was the path where I was embracing sin, and I am now moving off in a completely different direction. But I'm going to get held back on occasion. I just should do it less. But let's assume for a second that there's a doctrine, and Matthew's right, that at some point Christians just stop sinning. I haven't met one. I haven't seen evidence of one. And also, here's the really bad part. Why would you want to? If Christianity holds things that are not immoral, things that are not wrong, as sins, I don't want to stop sinning. Matt said it. Matt said it. I knew it. Matt said it. He acknowledged he doesn't want to stop sinning. Hey, why am I frozen on?
Yeah, refresh if you can.
Uh-oh.
Weird. Sometimes when people say that, oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, refresh again if that happens. I don't know if you could hear us.
I heard you say refresh, but that was it. Anyway, it is, we have resolved that issue. But yeah, if it's a sin to, I don't know, support someone's right to choose or to support LGBT stuff, if those things are sins, then I'm going to keep right on sinning where there's God. I've said before that if there is a God and he's not a humanist, fuck him. There's a lot of explaining somebody needs to do. I need a God to tell me what's wrong with my actual values. And it's not ever going to be the case because I said so, or because God is opposed to them. It is sufficient. That's, divine command theory doesn't work for me. All right. We have another caller that's calling in to correct a miscommunication from a previous call. So, Orion, who we last talked to like a week ago. Oh yeah, Orion a week ago said God saved him from being an atheist, and now he no longer wants to sin, which is, I guess, a little bit different from Matthew. So,
Ooh.
Orion, what's the miscommunication you're here to clear up?
Yeah, it's me, Orion. Yeah, you twisted my words against me last time because I had originally said that God literally wrote the Bible through man, and before you heard me say through man, you just took it as God literally wrote the Bible.
Okay, Orion, you're a liar, and I'm banning you from the show. You like that?
No, I didn't. I have another question though. I don't want to talk about that.
Well, no, that's what you called in to talk about. You're a liar.
Well, I have another topic.
I'm going to mute you. I'm going to mute you because you're trying to talk over me. So, we had a conversation where I gave you ample time to speak, and to be clear, you proved that you did not know the Bible. You did not know whether or not God actually carved the 10 Commandments. You had ample opportunity to deal with all of this, and now you've called in this week to say that I twisted your words. I'm going to unmute you in a second, and if you'd like to have a conversation, oh, did I freeze again? No.
You're back.
Okay, I'm going to unmute you in a second, and if you'd like to have a conversation, and I'd like for Paul to get a chance, maybe we can get an understanding there. But you're going to apologize before we move on. But when you say God literally wrote the Bible even through men, that's still not God literally writing the Bible. But we'll try this again. Orion's calling back in. You're on with Paul and Matt. How are you, Orion?
I'm one of God's fatherless orphans, so you would be wise not to offend me again.
Okay, I'm going to mute you again. When I unmute you, I'd like you to explain what you mean by God's fatherless orphans. But before you do, you just said I would be wise to not offend you again, right? Did I hear that right, Paul?
That is what I heard.
Okay, Orion, if I offend you again, what's going to happen to me?
That's between you and God.
No. You're the one that called in with the fucking threat. You're going to tell me what's going to happen to me if I offend you again.
Please don't use profanity when talking to me.
I'll fucking curse whenever I fucking want to. You already knew you were going to do that. You're absolutely just a little troll trying to push buttons, aren't you? What's going to happen to me if I offend you again? What's going to happen to me?
With evidence that the Bible is real.
No, you didn't. What's going to happen to me if I offend you again?
There's hundreds of thousands of cross-references.
What's going to happen to me if I offend you again? If you think you're going to get to say anything at all other than before you answer my question, you're an idiot. What is going to happen to me if I offend you again?
That's between you and God.
Nope. I'm going to mute you again, Orion. We're going to have a fun day, you and I. If you'd like to talk, you're going to answer that question, you fucking idiot, for threatening me on my own show. So here we go again. I don't know exactly what it is that'll offend you. I want to get to that next. But first thing that needs to happen is, Orion, I need you to tell me what's going to happen to me.
You insulted my intelligence.
Correct.
By attacking my 4.8 GPA.
What's going to happen to me if I offend you again?
Only God knows that.
Then why did you say something was going to happen to me if I offend you again?
Because it will.
Because it will. Cool.
You won't
does it offend you when I say? Does it offend you when I say that you're dimmer than the dimmest bulb in my entire house? Does that offend you?
Let's just get to what I was originally.
No. We're on this subject right now, and then I'm going to apologize to Paul for wasting his time. Does it offend you when I point out how stupid you are? Does that offend you?
You're a very mean and ungodly man.
Yeah, I'm absolutely an ungodly man, but I'm not mean. I'm sitting here.
You are mean.
You fucking threatened me, you little shit. Now answer the question. Does it offend you when I talk about how stupid you are? Yes or no? I'm hanging up if you don't answer.
Okay, well, I'm not going to answer that question.
Then you bye. Okay. Here we go.
That is a very strange thing to burst into someone's home and say, "You're a moron. Also, if you offend me, I'm gonna, bad things are gonna happen though that you can imagine about. Now let's have a nice chat about something else." That's a strange opening gambit.
Yeah. There's people who are like, yeah, he got his 4.0 GPA at PragerU or whatever. So here's the thing. You're not going to get to call the show and threaten me. You can say that I took your words out of context. That's not true. Anybody can go back and listen to the clip. I could probably milk Orion for thousands of dollars of clips over the next couple months if I wanted to. But I don't, because unlike what Orion might think, all I want, like there's 3 atheists on hold right now. We're going to get to them here in just a second. All I want is theists to call in and say, here's what I believe and why I believe it. And when myself and the co-host ask them specific questions about how can you demonstrate this? How do you understand it? That they answer the questions that we're asking. If the questions we ask are too difficult, you can say that. If you think the question's unfair, we can look at that and say, okay, here's why that question is unfair. So yeah, sorry, Paul, for wasting your time with Orion there, but I don't put up well with bullies. And when you call in to my show to say that if I offend you, I would be wise because you are one of God's fatherless orphans, and I would be wise not to offend you. I want to know what you think is going to happen and what I need to do to offend you, because I'm absolutely going to do it. If you say that God will smite me if I say that, you're dumber than a sack of hammers, I'm going to say you're dumber than a sack of hammers. If you say that God is going to attack me because I say that you're the most handsome person on the planet, I'm going to say you're the most handsome person on the planet. Because you have now established some sort of criteria where I can test whether or not you have any understanding of what God's going to do. And the truth is, Orion doesn't have a clue, just throws out threats when he acknowledges, oh, that's between you and God. Then why the fuck are you telling me about it? If it's between me and God, shut your pie hole. If there's something between me and God, you're not involved. It's an A and B conversation. You can see your way out. Matt in Canada. Hey, somebody's calling from Canada. So Matt from Canada, pronouns are he, him, is calling in about a memorial service. Oh, for his father. Matt, you're on. Paul and Matt. How are you?
Hey,
sorry.
Hey guys, I'm okay. Thanks. It was a few years ago, though, those things don't ever, necessarily get better. Basically I'm in a bit of a tough situation. I am an atheist, and thank you guys for helping me with that, with your various shows over the years. Have kind of helped me go from like a wishy-washy, oh, I'm agnostic, to like, no, I'm pretty convinced that there's nothing out there. But anyway, the last time we had a memorial for my dad, since he passed away a few years ago, the priest started off with the reading where somebody says they're going to follow Jesus, and Jesus says, all right, come on. And he goes, yeah, just give me a minute. I got to bury my dad. And Jesus tells him, let the dead bury their dead. So that was the reading, which was great. And then the priest used that as a launch pad to tell everybody in the mass that he was so disappointed because during COVID, lots of the regular parishioners, especially the elderly ones, stopped showing up to mass. And when he saw them on the street, or when he saw them when they eventually came back to mass in the future, that they said, we couldn't come because we wanted to come, but our children convinced us not to because COVID is dangerous. And he was very upset about that because, Jesus should come before the wants of your family. And he was deeply offended that people had taken the advice of their loving children to their elderly parents to not go to a place packed with, lots of humans while there's a worldwide pandemic. So the last mass, when all that happened, I told my family, like, you know what? I'm kind of grateful. I am grateful because I am done. I'm never coming here again. Yeah. So now another year has passed, and my mom organized another mass, and I love her dearly, and she expects me to come, and she expects me to come with my wife and my 2 young children, who I have not raised specifically to be atheists, but I have raised with, as much information as I can give them. And I like to think that I have raised them to be critical thinkers. And I'm okay with them going to, a mass here or there with grandma, specifically not that specific building. It just incenses me. If they want to discover spirituality for themselves. And I said I wouldn't go back. But now I'm in the position where I'm being told, either I be what I think is a good dad or that I be a good son. And I don't know what to do.
My apologies, because I wasn't Catholic. Usually, I don't go to multiple funerals for the same person. So it's now a year later, and your mom's organized basically another mass specifically for your dad?
No, what it is they pay some stipend or whatever. I don't know what stupid thing it is. They pay some amount to the church, and then at some point during the ceremony, they read out a list of, the people for whom we are praying in particular in this ceremony. And, they try to keep it exclusive so you can only have so many people per mass or whatever.
Your mom,
yeah.
Your mom knows you're a non-believer, right?
Yeah. We've talked about it all over the place, and she's like, well, but it's for me. So you're coming for me. So why is that hard?
Yeah. My take on this is pretty straightforward. You're trying to be a good dad to kids. That trumps everything else. If your mom's mad that you're going to prioritize your kids over her, ask her if she felt the same way when you were a kid. Did she prioritize her mom over her kids? Because it's time to break the cycle.
I know exactly what she would say, to be honest, although I guess I should give her that chance. When I was a kid, again, this exact church, although probably not the priest who's there, he's probably long dead. My mom had a hysterectomy after I was born. Sorry, not a hysterectomy. She had her tubes tied after I was born because it was a very difficult pregnancy and there were complications, and they said not to do that again. And she was told by a priest at that church, basically, you have sinned in such a way that you will never be welcome in heaven. You cannot be redeemed. There is no path for you to heaven. And she kept going to church. So I can tell you that in her eyes, even though what she did was for her health and, the health of the children she was raising, that, church told her that was bad, that was wrong, and she stayed. So I don't know what more, I don't know what more somebody can tell you to get you to leave and not come back other than, hey, you are irredeemable. So yeah, as a kid, I always wondered why she wouldn't do communion, because when she had gone to confession and said, she had her tubes tied, they said, yeah, you're irredeemable. You should never take communion again. You will never get to heaven. And she still chose church. So I don't know.
Yeah, Matt, as a someone who is a father and a son, there's no, as Matt already said, there's just simply no question that you need to prioritize your kids, and so whether that means you go to the service without the kids, or if you all decide not to go, either way, I think that has to be the answer. Now, I think what you're asking now is how do you deal with the ramifications from your mom? This is just classic boundary setting in the realm of what all good relationships have to have is some levels of boundaries and well spoken, well articulated boundary setting. So you may or may not have had that conversation with your mother. This is probably the time you need to start having it. But no, I think you know that the answer is that you can't take your kids. It sounds like that's what you understand, and so I don't know. Are you struggling now with how to tell her, or what the fallout is going to be, or did you just need us to be cathartic, which is also just fine? Did you need to just kind of get someone to let you know that you're making the right call?
Yeah, I guess more than anything, I think I needed to hear it from somebody else, because it's hard within your own circle of friends, because I was, as much as my family was Catholic, my circle of friends growing up and many friends that I keep to this day are not particularly religious. All of that said, none of them are like hard atheists. So it's just nice to hear from somebody that I'm not. It's not overreacting to just say no, but it's not. That it shouldn't be offensive for me to say, here are my boundaries, and my job as a son or whatever, as a good son, shouldn't shouldn't require me to do something that I think is like unconscionable. I don't think I should support an edifice that has been so bad in several ways, the greater church and this church in particular. So yeah, I guess I just appreciate hearing somebody sympathize. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to say. So first of all, Matt, you're the one that's going to have to make up your mind where you're going to draw the lines. And if you think, for example, I could completely understand somebody who says, you know what, it's more important that there's a conflict-free relationship between myself and my mom and my kids and their grandmother. That's more important than whether or not we, sat through a mass. If there's a compromise here in that if it's truly about you being a good son, then you should be able to go to the mass on your own. Just don't take your kids. Say, I don't want to expose my kids to this, but I'm willing to support my mom. So that's my compromise. I'm happy to go to the mass with you and compromise and do this. I mean, I'm assuming you are. I'm just saying this is, I wouldn't,
Sure.
I don't think I would do it in any case, but if you can't come to agreement on, hey, I'm, I want to focus on my kids and make sure this, then okay, that's a possible option. And if it turns out that doesn't make her happy, then it seems that it's not so much about you being a good son, or maybe you're only a good son if you are in agreement to continue spreading Catholic doctrine to her grandchildren. And no matter how many masses she pays to arrange, it should be pretty straightforward that you're not going to be indoctrinating your kids into religion the way she did. If they end up Catholic when they're, adults, that's something different. But it's not going to be because you decided to, act as if this stuff that you don't believe is true or good, or that you believe it, because that's how the indoctrination happens. When you have kids are exceptionally good at reading adults. One of my favorite videos I've ever seen, I saw for the first time just a couple of weeks ago, and it is a bunch of toddlers sitting down on the floor of a room with huge carpet pythons just all around them. The kids aren't crying. They're not upset. They're not afraid. they reach out and touch the snakes. So some of them touch them right on the head. These are non-venomous, the snakes are essentially harmless, and the snakes put up with a lot. I can imagine you put them in a room with that many puppies, they're going to get bit. They're more likely to get bit in a room full of puppies or kittens than they are in a room full of those snakes. But the kids aren't afraid. And what we've learned from this, what the video is ultimately showing, is that the kids watch the parents. And if the parents react in a fearful way, the kids immediately go, I'm supposed to be afraid. It's the same thing when you watch kids fall down. Kids fall down, and if the parent rushes over to them like, oh my God, are you hurt? That's when the crying starts. There's no tears right before that. If the parent, if the kid falls down and everybody is like laughs like, oh my gosh, that was so fun or funny or whatever else, there's going to be less tears. Now, if there's still tears, kids do get hurt, but they read the parents for the reaction they're supposed to have. Many of our fears are learned. If not most, all of them are learned. And our reactions come from watching the adults around us. That's how evolution tuned our brains. And your mom is probably a victim of indoctrination in the same way that others in your family were, and that you were, and that you've decided you're not going to do that. If she's worried that your kids won't learn about Catholicism, you can say, hey, I'm going to teach my kids about many different religions in the world. Let them make up their own mind. There's a number of options that don't involve, or that could potentially ease a rift, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I appreciate. Go ahead.
Just one possible thing, Matt, and this is what I would probably do. So one thing you could potentially do with your mom is say, hey, Mom, when this service is done, me and my kids are going to meet you at a restaurant. And I'm going to talk to the kids, and the whole time, you are going to get to share your favorite stories about Grandpa, because the point of this is to celebrate Grandpa and to get to know more about Grandpa. They are not going to get to know anything about him by sitting through a sermon and hearing his name listed one time in the list of other names. So how about let's just meet for a while, focus on celebrating Grandpa, and you tell your best stories, and the kids are going to be set up for that. That is going to be a better honoring than us sitting in this service, and see if, like, that's just a possible placation. There's probably 50 other suggestions you could make, but if the point is to honor your dad, that church service isn't going to do it, and that would, if she rejects that, that's kind of a tipping of the hand that the point isn't to honor your grandpa or your dad, your father, their grandpa. The point is some other level of indoctrination. So that's just one possible thing that you might try.
I really appreciate that advice. I think I will do that. I've been so focused on like this one event and going and not going that I didn't really think of an alternative. So that's a very good advice. If I can just throw in a little story of my kids learning about the religion from grandma, very quick. Yeah, so my oldest, who's now 10, she was maybe 6 or something. The first time she asked me about, like, what's the cross thingy in grandma's house? And like sometimes she's praying, like they had slept over and she had like said prayers with them before bed. And like, what does that mean? And they do meditation and starting in kindergarten here, or at least at my kids' school. So it's like, oh, it's kind of like meditation. You think about stuff and what you're thankful for and whatever. And she's like, oh, but she keeps talking about this Jesus guy. Like, what is that? And, I'm trying to be charitable, and I give the happy highlights of, Jesus was a guy who said, love each other and all that nice stuff. And, he died, and he died in a way where, he was put on a cross, and that's why they have the cross. And then, grandma believes he came back 3 days later, and he, said to everybody, hey, here I am, believe in me, believe in God. And then he went up to heaven. And my daughter, she just goes, that's a really nice story. I think Jesus is great. I'm like, oh, okay, that's nice. I'm sure grandma would love to hear that, but there's a lot more to it. And she goes, I just don't believe the last part. I'm like, which last part? Nobody comes back from the dead dad. That's like, he's like a zombie? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would anybody, like, how do you meditate thinking about a zombie? And it's like, yeah, that's fair. That's a fair thought. So that's about where my kids still are on that whole thing. So anyway.
Sounds like you're doing a good job, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thank you so much for everything you guys do.
I hope you find a way to make peace and make it work. But I agree with your basic sentiment to focus on protecting your kids.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks. We'll see you later. We've got loads of calls, including some theists.
Awesome.
But I want to make sure that we do the announcements for the other things coming up here on the Line Network over the next week. Obviously, you and I are doing the hang up today, and huge thank you to Paul. I got so excited because we knew it was coming up, but Arden was like, hey, Wednesday, you're going to do the show with Paul. And I was like, yay. Thursday's Transatlantic Call-In show is going to be Josie and Luxander at 2 p.m. Central. That's not actually happening. This says debate Saturday, but it's not. It's a placeholder. Sunday show is going to be myself and Arden at 2 p.m. and the Sunday show after dark's going to be Paulogia and Eric from Skeptics and Scoundrels. So we're going to have a jam-packed Sunday. Next Monday, Skeptalk's going to be Aron Ra and Professor Dave. Tuesday is going to be Chewed Gum with Eve and Alyssa. And next Wednesday, we're not quite sure what's going to happen. My apologies to Dara, but I just got the call that I need to be in St. Louis for pre-surgery screening next week for an oral surgery. So we will do our best to get Dara on some other time. So I guess, Arden, if you haven't already told Dara, we should do that so that we don't tell him last minute, because that would be annoying.
It's not like there's a time change involved or anything.
Yeah.
All
right. Are you ready?
I am.
This is going to be a moderately unusual call for us, and I'm genuinely excited. Calling from New York, pronouns are he, him. Rada wants to give an argument for Hinduism. So, Rada, you are on with Paul and Matt. I don't know about Paul, but I'm intrigued. Please say hello and yeah, thank you. And what is your argument for Hinduism?
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. This is a great honor. I can't say that I'm not nervous because I am, I guess, human after all. Yes, I am indeed calling from a, let's say, alternative perspective. Can you hear me?
Yes. Keep going.
We can. Carry on.
Perfect. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so I actually ran into your lectures or your, let's say, debates by chance a couple of weeks ago. And I was pleasantly surprised. And then I realized I could actually speak to you. And I was like, well, hello. I was just like meeting a celebrity. I think it's better than meeting a celebrity because I don't think I have anything important. I don't think I have anything important to talk about a celebrity.
No.
Yeah.
I don't need any of that. I just need you to defend Hinduism.
Matt gets old fast.
How are you? Bro, I was actually, yes, I am a Hindu. So, and by that, it is important for people to understand that there is no such thing as Hinduism, in the sense that Hinduism is a broad term to describe. It was kind of coined by the British colonialists to sort of coin everything that came out of India, essentially was Hinduism, even though Hinduism itself, India itself is sort of, I would say, a subcontinent full of literally thousands of different sort of philosophical understandings or schools. In India, you literally have hundreds, if not thousands, of different philosophical schools with all kinds of different thoughts that include Christianity, include Islam, Judaism.
This is an argument for Hinduism. I mean, it's already starting
No,
off
no,
pretty bad
of course not.
because
No. Of course, no. Listen, our usual, our natural. Listen,
I am listening.
traditionally, our listeners are usually Christian, right?
Are you just trying to try and shout
No,
over
no.
me? Is that how that's going to work? Then stop talking.
No, of course not. Of course
Then
not.
stop
I'm just
talking.
nervous. I do apologize.
Then stop talking.
Mhm.
I want to hear the defense of Hinduism, and the reason that I'm asking for it is because that's what you called it to give. But also, I understand.
Right, but wouldn't you think it's important to define
Oh
Hinduism?
my God! Can I finish my fucking thought?
Of course.
You say, of course, but that's not what was happening. So I'm already aware that there are many different schools of Hinduism. All I need to know is, are you defending a particular school? What is it? And what's the defense? That's it. I don't need a history lesson on the history of a bunch of different Hindu varieties or any of that. I just need you to present the defense of Hinduism, and telling me that there's a bunch of different varieties of it doesn't seem to be a defense of it. That seems to be almost a condemnation, because it's either true or it's not. So go ahead.
Correct. Yes, I apologize once again. I did not mean to insult your intelligence. I was I guess I was speaking to the audience who are not familiar with Hinduism.
I don't need that explanation either.
Yeah.
I just need you to say, here's the version of Hinduism I think is true, and here's the defense of it. That's it.
Well, I was actually, I thought that the point of this this conversation was to prove the existence of God.
Are you going to prove the existence of a God? And what the heck's that have to do with Hinduism?
Correct. That's right. That's what, but
what do you mean correct? That's right. This is the weirdest call I've had in ages. And all I want is for you to say, here's what I believe about Hinduism to be true, and here's why. That's it. That's all I need.
Correct. Okay, so here I go. So I'm going to start. I'll make my case, and then whenever you want to stop me, you can go ahead and stop me, and I'll stop.
I already know that No, stop. Do you think that I'm unaware that I can stop you whenever I want? Have you seen this show ever in the history of the world? That's what I do.
That's why I actually said it.
I've stopped you half a dozen times already.
Correct.
Please, for the love of fucking something, tell me which Hinduism you're defending and what the defense is.
Correct. So, I think that, first of all, okay, let's put it this way, okay? I think, okay, that Hinduism.
Oh my God. No, stop.
The fact.
I'm going to mute you. You just said, I think, okay, let me put it this way. I think, okay, if you're not ready to just say, here's what I believe and here's why it's true, you don't have to continue right now. You can formulate your thoughts and call back another time. If you're ready, do it. If you're not ready, call back another time.
I'm ready to formulate my thoughts.
This is not a show for you to formulate your thoughts. You should have had them formulated already, but let's give it a try.
I already have them. Yes. So, in listening to your debates, I recall you mentioning that while you were practicing, with somebody who actually entertained the belief of God, you had an experience. And what Hinduism is about, in general terms, it's about that experience. It's about defining that experience. Because that experience itself is what God is. But yet, to define that experience, you need to learn, you need to be aware of all kinds of sciences, right? Because God, for example, the word God itself means nothing, right? There, you can say God in English. You can say Dios in Spanish. You can say Dio. God, the word God itself can be said in many different languages. So,
Rada, I'll give you $100 if you say the next sentence with anything substantive that points to the truth of Hinduism. I'll give you $100 gift card because everything you've mumbled for the last 3 minutes has been absolutely
Mhm.
substance free.
Okay. Are you saying that your experience was substance free? When you went to you used to be a Christian, correct? And you went to
Yeah.
church and you had an
Yeah.
experience that you
Yeah.
described as saying that you know what? You actually said that it was technically better than getting high. You actually said that you could describe your religious experience as
No, I
being
didn't.
equivalent or something to greater than getting high.
I said that it's comparable. I didn't say it was better.
It's comparable. Okay, comparable. Okay, comparable. Okay.
Yes.
So that is God. That's it. You found God. You found it. That
No, I didn't.
experience in
No,
Hinduism,
Rada.
in Hinduism.
Okay, Rada, I'm muting you because now you're screaming into the phone, and I'm the only one that gets to do that. But you called in to say you wanted to give an argument for Hinduism. If all you're going to do is say that because I had an experience that was euphoric, I have found God, that is not an argument for Hinduism. That is not an argument for God. That is you asserting that a psychological experience I had has some other explanation. What is the proof of that?
Correct. That is
No.
not my argument, by the way.
Okay, I'm going to mute you again. Every time I ask you a question or try to correct you, you start off with correct and then you keep going, which tells me that you're not listening and you're not trying to have this. I'm going to give you one more shot to defend Hinduism because you just said that everything you just said isn't your argument. So I'm going to unmute you and I'd like for you to say, my argument is, and then present your argument. Anything else, and I'm going to move on. You are unmuted.
Hello. Yes, I am a Latino, so I'm actually not from India. So I was actually not born in India. I don't have any sort of like.
I'm sorry, but evidently you're not paying any fucking attention to what I actually say. I'm going to unmute you. And when I do, I'd like you to say, my argument for Hinduism is, and then present your argument. Anything else, and this will be strike 2. You're unmuted.
My Hinduism argues that your experience is God. Period. That's it. I don't have anything else to say.
Correct. You don't. Goodbye. Paul?
Well, so basically that was an ad for having good experiences, I guess. And if I have more good experiences, I'm more godly. Okay.
I think I'm failing here, Paul. I think what
Oh,
I'll do
no.
is, when I take the next call, I'm just
Mhm.
going to let you talk to them from the very second that they're live. Because evidently, when I ask someone for the argument or evidence that they called in to say they can present, I somehow flip a switch in their brain where after trying to blow me for a minute or two, they then want to rattle off other things that aren't. It's like, oh, you remember that time you had that experience? That was God. Cool. I understand that's what you think. Why do you think that? Why should I think that? Well, that's what Hinduism says, and that's all I've got to say. Well, congratulations. It's got, at this point, it's just got to be me.
I mean, I guess
So,
I guess we can experiment with that, but I'm not convinced that that's the only variable at play here.
we'll try. Actually, I can't completely bow out of the next one because
No, we shouldn't.
I find it kind of pretty interesting. So Max in Illinois, pronouns are he, him, is a theist who wants to talk about morality and sentience. So Max, you're on with Paul and Matt. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me. The essence of my point is this question: if ants had the same sort of sentience and qualia as humans, would it still be all right to smash them when they invade your kitchen?
So first of all, I reject the notion of qualia. I don't think qualia is a real thing, but I also, sentience is kind of complicated, and how it's defined, which I find it really interesting. You said if ants had the same sort of sentience that we had. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but I will say that my view on morality isn't tied exclusively to sentience. It's a social contract between individuals that are sentient. I don't know, but I want to make sure Paul gets in on this too.
So far so good. I don't. I'm actually thinking through the question of how because obviously we do. When we evaluate our morality, it's maybe not the best thing, but we do tend to treat creatures outside of humanity. We give them most empathy, and Matt, you know this as someone who deals with snakes and a lot of creatures that are very dissimilar to humans. Humans tend to prefer mammals to reptiles, and reptiles to fish, and these kind of things in terms of what kind of morality and the kind of treatment we're willing to give them. So it's very interesting, this question of would we be able to overcome our prejudice against an ant, or our consideration that an individual ant isn't necessarily that worth protecting if they had a level of sentience. Caller, can you maybe expand on that a bit?
Yeah. So basically, I have like a lot of ants in my kitchen, and they get everywhere when I try to cook food. So I was thinking about, like, as I smash them and kill maybe 50 a day, if they had, I'm a theist, obviously. So if they had the same sort of, how do I describe it? Sentience, in the same, like, if they were like little human minds inside ants, but like they were like similar to us. They were just ants, and they experienced being ants as normal, but they had like the same sort of characteristics that we attribute to like other humans. Would essentially killing a bunch of them be immoral? Because yes, they look different, but we don't kill let's say Indian people because they look different, as the last caller, right? So it's like how without someone telling you how to treat others, like a book, can you make this decision?
Well, my view of morality is predicated largely on reducing harm and increasing flourishing. And I usually say increasing human flourishing, because as a species, I think that morality is entirely grounded in our biology and our evolution as a social species, and the benefits thereof that it has given us. I think that is where our instincts about and our intuitions about morality have come from. So you raise excellent questions. I think that we would have to probably, a better morality would extend to more species than our own. The question I'm grappling with is whether or not me as an individual would be able to extend my, even though I grant that a better morality would probably extend to more sentient species than just my own, if I would be able to overcome those prejudices, as I also have killed several ants this year. An excellent question. You said you're a theist.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a deist.
Is that correct? Oh, you're a deist.
Yes,
Okay. Because I was wondering if maybe you were trying to talk about the nefesh in the Old Testament, right? The soulishness that some Christians and others who are Abrahamic religions want to say that God actually gave this nefesh to other fuzzy fuzzy, for lack of better words, creatures that relate to humans, like horses or whatever, that they have some version of a soul, and that kind of thing. I'm glad you're not going that route. I don't know. I think my answer would have to be, I hope that I would be able to expand my morality to give greater consideration for something that is going to, in essence, suffer more. But I don't know if I would be perfect enough to do that. Matt, where do you land?
Yeah, my take on morality is, I'm fine with the notion that ants might be sentient, and I've seen things that, like, suggest that bumblebees present some characteristics that we would probably describe as sentience. And if you only describe sentience as like awareness, or the ability to sense and feel and that sort of thing, just where you're adding just the cognitive ability of like conscious of oneself. I'm happy to extend that to pretty much every living. I'm not even sure that there aren't some plants that might qualify as sentient in an incredibly limited sense, which is why I found it really interesting, Max, when you talked about, what if the ants in the kitchen were sentient in the way we are. I can't say that it would make that immoral on its own, but I would think that if we knew and understood that ants were sentient as like in the same way we are, that would change the nature of the moral views. For me, morality is a social contract in the sense of I'm going to afford some rights and responsibility to other creatures. For example, Arden just got her first jumping spider as a gift this weekend, and it's the first time I've ever held a spider. Second time I did touch a tarantula once, but this was a little bitty spider, and I let it crawl in my hand. And it's really cute, and it pretty much ended. Like we have this kind of aversion to inverts. As Paul was pointing out, we care about humans first, and then potentially other mammals, and usually the mammals that are cute or kept as pets end up at the top of the list, and then that gets extended out to other mammals, and then maybe some reptiles for some people like me. I'd rather hang out with snakes than bears, actually. But there comes a point where, like jumping spider, I didn't consider it like other spiders, and they are brilliant. Like they're wicked fucking smart and virtually impossible to sneak up on because the way their eyes are situated. So they got 360-degree field of view. It's amazing. However, if we're talking about ending something's life, the criteria that we have for that, I don't think it's based on just sentience. I'm not quite sure. I mean, usually if you talk to like some animal rights activists and stuff, it's more about their ability to suffer. And so that seems to me to be a step beyond mere sentience. I've had to euthanize. What if we give them what?
That they can suffer. What if we give them that they can suffer? Because my question is, what happens when,
Sure.
in Starship Troopers, for example, these like huge bugs you have that, they can probably suffer. That is it still okay to, launch a nuke and destroy their planet because they're a nuisance to us, for example, such as ants are in the kitchen?
I think if they're on a planet, they're not a nuisance to us unless we're there. But setting aside
whatever hypothetical.
Sure. So first of all, morality is situational. And for me, it's a social contract between, like I have a different contract with Paul than I do with Arden. And I have a different contract with humans than I do with other animals. And as we get further and further from us, the contract gets weaker, in part because, ants and spiders don't have the ability to communicate to us and let us know what they want. Hey, I'd like my rights. I'd like for you to not squish me, And generally the animal rights folks are like, yes, you idiot. Of course they can't do that. They don't communicate with us like that way, but of course they don't want to be killed. My view of morality isn't tied just to suffering. There are people whose view that is, and Peter Singer's view repeatedly is about minimizing suffering. And while I'm in favor of minimizing suffering, I think that's one factor of several that get pieced together, in that my moral view is more complex and maybe inferior to Peter Singer's. I think it's superior. But to just look at the question, if ants have the same sort of sentience as humans, should it be immoral to squish them in the kitchen? I would say that there's a very strong case that should in fact be immoral, that the contract we should have with ants would change if in fact they had sentience like us.
Right. And what about the sort of not usefulness, but convenience. Like I'm sure like an ant in the kitchen eating some crumbs that fall to the floor, it inconveniences us because it's disgusting having ants on your food on your plates. Is that warrant? Does that warrant it enough to do that? And it's like a very crazy idea because that's kind of like what the Nazis kind of probably thought too about the Jews and stuff.
Yeah. See, now we've crossed over into something that's beyond ridiculous, where we're engaged in a hypothetical about whether or not, if ants had sentience like us, would we view them differently? Yes. And now you're like, that's how the Nazis viewed the Jews. Well, how the Nazis viewed the Jews is completely separate from how they should have viewed the Jews. Jews are people. And earlier, when you said we don't just take out Indian people because they look different. Well, first of all, they don't look different from Indian people. Your statement of they look different already assumes a bias towards whatever it is that you look like or whatever it is that I look like, as if how we look is the criteria of who we are. But that's not what defines being human. A human is not how you look. And being a particular ethnicity also isn't merely about how you look. Gender isn't about how you look. There's more to it than this. If you want to talk about the Nazis and them viewing Jews as an inferior race, they were wrong, and that was immoral.
Okay. But essentially, if these, I'm going back to the ants example. If these ants had
Probably best.
everything's same as people, it's just that they're just ants. Doesn't that mean the morality is kind of like arbitrary in the sense that some Americans don't kill horses and eat them because we like how they look, and historically we've used them more than eaten them. But people in Central Asia have
you've described a scenario that may or may not have a moral assessment. The fact that one culture might kill and eat an animal that another culture doesn't kill and eat doesn't necessarily make it a difference in morality. I don't kill and eat horses because I don't have any horses and I don't have any need to. But if some sort of dystopian society thing arrives and I need to kill and eat a horse to survive, that horse is going to be dinner.
Can the same thing apply to humans? Like if you crash in the Andes and then you have to wait for a rescue over winter, you don't want to start.
There are situations and circumstances where that's happened and where people made the decision that if whichever one of them dies first, the rest of them should eat them in order to prolong their life. There's a difference between using the resource and killing the individual. And the contract that I have with other humans is different from the contract that I have with horses. So for example, I've squashed spiders many times in my life. I'm not going to squash Arden's spider, not because I think it's an immoral treatment of Arden's spider, but because the spider is Arden's. The harm there isn't so much in me killing a spider. The harm there is in hurting something that someone I care about loves.
Yeah, Max, you asked if morality isn't somewhat arbitrary, and I think we've been affirming all along that it absolutely is. There's concentric circles about what we care about, and we can't really help that. So we're gonna care most, and it's just basic tribalism, right? We care most about ourselves. We care, then the next circle is our immediate family or our loved ones, and then it's our tribe. This used to be geographical, but now our tribes aren't necessarily geographical. So your city and your nation and your ethnicity or whatever, but we just can't help that we care more about what's closer to our inner circle, what's most like us. And things get further away, they're less like us, and that's what I was attempting to describe before. That just that is the way it is, and I don't think either Matt or I are going to argue that morality isn't arbitrary in that way.
I wouldn't use the word. I don't like the word arbitrary because it almost feels like you have no reason. It's not arbitrary. It's
subjective
biased
in that way.
We are biased and subjective, and our bias is towards us, and but it's not arbitrary. It's because we are basically the descendants of people who survived and grew because of building communities, communicating with others, because we chose to prioritize. I mean, we probably, did we kill Neanderthals? Did we wipe out a competing species? We exist as the descendants of those who made these decisions. Doesn't mean anything at all about whether or not those decisions are right. My moral foundation is, well, you can Google superiority to secular morality and find a talk that I gave where I talk about you can begin with really simple foundations of life is generally preferable to death. Health is generally preferable to illness. Pleasure and happiness is generally preferable to pain and sadness. And that there are occasions where even those foundational principles don't prove out. Our former coworker here, Dave Warnock, who did the Dying Out Loud show, has been dying of ALS for several years now. And I've had other friends who suffered from illnesses. I'm a huge supporter of death with dignity. And so one of my former friends ended his life on his terms rather than continue suffering. And I fully support that. I want to be able to do that if I'm ever in that position. It's pretty important. And the reason that, I mean, people in chat are talking up how you got to thinking about ants and that led to, cannibalism and Nazis. What's really happening here is Max, like many other people, was trying to figure out, okay, where do I draw the lines and why? And I draw a variety of lines for a variety of reasons. But I'm also not beholden to, I mean, you said you're a deist, so you're not, right? I got that right, Max? You're a deist, so you're not advocating for any particular religious doctrine?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think we should use like a book written a long time ago to base our policies now.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that I have that much more to add on that. You're going to figure out where you draw lines, and I think most people tend to draw lines based. I hate to say that morality is an evolutionary byproduct, but it is in the sense that everything about our psychology and who we are, those are evolutionary byproducts. But it's not like, I don't ever want to portray it as if evolution had a particular moral goal or any goal at all, because that would be inaccurate. But who we are is the result of all of our ancestors and who survived and why. And it leads to both our biases that are biased positively for our success and our biases that are negative both to our success and to the success of other animals. We could blow up. We could destroy the world between not addressing climate change problems and potential, nuclear weapons and other things. We could absolutely take out the planet, or at least, really, really, really do some damage. And, not to quote Jurassic Park, but yes, life will probably find a way, and some new form of life that's hopefully better than us will begin to thrive in maybe a million years.
Right. Yeah, this is a very profound idea, and I'll definitely give it some thought. But I don't really have anything else to add to this discussion at this point.
Thanks, Max.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. Bye-bye.
Yep. Keep thinking. It's really weird because I don't know if you did the same thing, Paul. I talked about this years and years ago. I walked down at a revival at the age of 5 and accepted Jesus into my heart and was just a Southern Baptist kid with a couple of excursions to Pentecostal churches, all the way up until I was about 30, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then when I found my way out, I had a pretty good crisis, which is everything I knew or thought I knew about morality came from a particular interpretation of the Bible. And so the first thing I did is, okay, if I'm done with Christianity, I'm done with that interpretation, and I'm done with that book, what is my foundation for morality? Is murder wrong? Is murder immoral, and
Right.
why? I did something that I don't think too many people ever do, which is, why is this act something that I do think is immoral? Do I have a good reason to think it's immoral? Should I think it's immoral? Am I likely correct that it's immoral? What the hell do I mean by moral? Whereas prior to that, it was, thou shalt not kill. Okay. Da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
did you have, how was your
Christianity
crisis?
kind of gave us that ability to abdicate our decision making, right? Like we could, if I wanted to know whether it was okay to pirate music or something, right? Something I could just go to the Bible and find out stealing was wrong, and this is ultimately stealing. So there's no gray area; it's just wrong. You know, so you didn't have to think of these things through. Well, you just had to know your references and look it up. I had the exact same crisis you had. It was ultimately building then, okay, what are my values? That, because you can't make a decision about whether something aligns to my values unless I actually define for myself what these values are going to be, absent of God. And that's, so I referenced that briefly. I'm still searching all along, but it has something to do with at least reducing harm and increasing flourishing, among humans. And at least I can use that as a framework. The other model I often use is like, if everyone did this, took this action, I'm thinking about, would the world be better or worse place to live, is another heuristic I kind of try to use now. But I'm with you. When I didn't have the Bible anymore to remove that decision making process, it felt very heavy, and it did take a couple of years for me to feel comfortable in that skin.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's a difficult thing, and I don't want to slight people, because the easier road is, I mean, it's obvious that you call it the easier road because it's easier. It strikes me as, how much different would my life have been if I hadn't found my way out? If I was still kind of going through on autopilot of, here's what I've learned about what this book says, and I'm just going to go with it, and didn't question beyond that. It's, I don't know. It's a weird struggle that I think about quite frequently. If, I don't think, there's a quote from Bertrand Russell that is, it's a wise thing now and then to hang a question mark on things you've long taken for granted. It's an incredibly important sentiment. And it's one of the things that, I mean, I don't take a lot of pride in me or what I've done, or, when I come across like a 13-year-old that found their way out of religion, I'm like, what
Absolutely.
the hell took me so long? And kudos, you're awesome. I'm the big dummy that took years and years. But I don't feel that way. I don't feel it. I didn't get smarter. I don't think that theists are stupid. I think some of the callers calling in to defend stuff are fairly stupid. But I don't necessarily begin with that assumption. But I also am pretty confident that there's not a lot of people who have spent as much time and effort really digging in and thinking about, what do I believe and why, on as many different subjects. I've changed my position on capital punishment, because for the longest time it was, my thought was, well, I can understand scenarios under which I would be okay with capital punishment. But generally speaking, I don't trust that our system is good enough to give me the sort of results where I would be comfortable enacting capital punishment on that. So that already moved me away from being in favor of capital punishment to being opposed to it, even though ideologically not opposed. And now I think I'm really close to ideologically opposed, that even the things in the past that I would have looked at and said, that would be a deserving of death type of act, I don't feel that way anymore. I think that even if I witnessed it, I might have difficulty. Like if I watched someone just brutally kill an entire family, I know that I wouldn't feel bad if they were put to death over that, but I don't necessarily feel that that's the right course of action. That instead, like, the obsessive learner in me wants to study them and find out what made them do that to help others.
And you're not talking about a scenario where you watch them do it and they're going to turn around and do it to others. You're not talking about a self-defense type of a situation. You're talking about if they were captured and then we're a year past the event kind of thing.
Yeah. Is it, it's like did they shoot a bunch of people because there's a tumor in their head, or is there something? I think it's more important for us to figure out exactly what's going on, so that maybe we can use that to help other people to both not become the murderer, but also not be murdered. I don't know. It's a lot. We've got some callers to get to. Kiwi in Canada
I think it's more important for us to figure out exactly what's going on, so that maybe we...
Okay, I'm going to mute that. Kiwi, pronouns she, her, hopefully will turn off the show once they get caught up and realize that we're going to take their call. And I think they want to talk about, why is Christophobia an acceptable form of bigotry? So
figure out exactly what's going on.
Are you there? Wow.
So that maybe I'm going to mute that.
Okay. I'm going to return Kiwi to the queue. So for people calling into the show, I realize the call screeners are going to ask you questions and everything else. You're going to be on a delay, but it shouldn't be a huge delay. And we'll try one more time with Kiwi, but don't have the show playing in the background where I can hear it. Okay. Never mind.
I'm going to return Kiwi to the queue. So for people calling into the show,
we're going to drop the call. So why is Christophobia the only not the only, but an acceptable form of bigotry? I don't even know what Christophobia really is. It would have been neat to figure out what they mean by Christophobia.
I'm assuming this just means generally anti-Christian.
Yeah. I would take it that way. Why is it okay, Paul?
This plays partially into the whole persecution complex that they have, right? That for some reason that anything that's said against an idea is against the person, seems to be how that is interpreted. And I was equally guilty. I absolutely interpreted any attack on Christ. If I heard someone using the Lord's name in vain, I took that personally, right? Like that was an attack on me and my Savior. And so I understand how this feels like an attack on the other side. And I also understand that when you're so localized, you have that confirmation bias, right? You feel like that no one's doing the same thing to other belief systems, when I feel like I absolutely am treating all belief systems on an absolute same playing field basis. And even though I speak more about Christianity than I speak about other faiths, I would have loved to have got into the caller, but I feel like it's just a confirmation bias.
Yeah. I mean, I think it. So I've done this for 20 years, pretty much, or nearly 20 years. I despise Christianity. I don't despise Christians. And I get that I would hope that somebody who buys into the love the sinner, hate the sin would have some minimal understanding of that. There are Christians I despise, don't get me wrong. But that's because of who they are as people. There are plenty of non-Christians I despise as well. There are people who pretend to be Christians who are probably not Christians who I really despise. Don't even have to name any names. Some of them are orange. But what I despise is the doctrine, both for what it does and can do, but also because it fails to demonstrate that it's true while being held up as if it's not just true, it's an obvious, essential truth, and anyone who doesn't see and understand that is an immoral reprobate deserving of eternal torment. Now, as much as I despise Christianity, I also despise Islam. Muhammad was a pederast, raping piece of shit. And some of the Muslims that I've debated actually support that view. You've got Daniel, who was advocating for sex as early as 4 if precocious puberty sets in with and allowing that to be a spouse. Which one do I despise more? Probably Islam, because I've never, ever, ever had a Christian sit next to me and tell me why it was okay for them to have sex with a 4-year-old. Oh, I know that there's some of them out there who think they can or should. I know that the churches have become criminal organizations hiding child rapists from prosecution, shuffling them around. Not just the Catholic Church either, the Baptist Church and other churches as well. It is absolutely, I'm not conspiracy theory minded. It is a conspiracy that we have direct evidence of, and it's been documented. It's been tried in courts. I'd like to see all of them bankrupted. But if any religion has doctrine that is true, I want to know. And if they don't, then they absolutely need to stop claiming that it's true. Just like the governor of Louisiana needs to stop claiming that Moses is the origin of all the law. That is not a fact. That is not history. That is not good law. That is your religious doctrine. And you don't get to impose it on other people. We got a couple other calls left, and some of them have been on for ages. So,
all right.
Michaela, pronouns they, them from
the
Georgia.
Idea, not the idea holder. That's all I was going to say on the last one. So we're good.
You're going to say what?
All I was going to say was attack the idea, not the idea holder. That's when we're saying it's okay. When we would both say it's okay to attack any idea. Anyway, all good. Let's carry on.
Michaela, you're on with Paul and Matt.
All right. Glad to be back on the show today. My goal here is to really seek advice on how to push back against the Black Hebrew Israelite beliefs. Last time I called in, I went about it the completely wrong way. And today I want to correct that mistake by just more so seeking. I'm sorry, kind of out of breath.
This is okay. I don't know that I have any additional advice for you, but because I don't have a lot of experience with the Black Hebrew Israelites. So I would have to go out and research what it is exactly they're claiming. Is there some potential way to bunk it? But each one of the conversations is going to get to what is your position? What's the demonstration that it's true? And responding to that doesn't change for me, whether I'm talking to Catholics, Protestant, Muslims, Black Hebrew Israelites, or anything else. Paul, do you have particular familiarity and advice for Black Hebrew Israelites?
That is not. It's not a Canadian phenomenon that I have come across in my day-to-day life. No, so I'm the same as you. I know there are certain Christians who have argued against it, and it's weird that I don't even want to say their names out loud. There are Christian apologists who've done a good job saying that this is a false version of Christianity, but what does that mean? nothing one way or the other. So, but what aspect of it are you looking for advice on how to debunk them, or how to prove them they're wrong, to engage in your life? Like, what is it that you're struggling with?
It's just really more so, I guess because like there's a Black Hebrew Israelite in my life who's very close to me, and sometimes I debate whether or not I should try to pull them out, because they have this belief that white Jewish people are the fake Jewish people, and they stole this title from Black folks somehow, some way. But like it doesn't. It sounds like nonsense, but I just don't know how to challenge that specifically because I don't really. There's a lot I want to say about Jewish people.
Then don't. If you haven't come up with a way to address it, and don't have the research, and don't have, arguments and evidence to counter it, don't. It's not your job to fix everybody.
Totally. I feel that. But there is like this one Bible verse. I'm just kind of curious as to how you and Paul might react to it. But basically, there's this verse in the Bible where King Solomon is speaking, and he says, "I am black but comely." I don't know if you ever heard that verse before, but what do you think this verse could have possibly meant?
Have you looked at any Bible commentaries on it?
I've seen a few. Some of them said that he was just talking about his depression. I believe so.
Because I don't speak Hebrew.
I'm looking it up now.
So I would definitely want to go back to the Hebrew, obviously, if it's Old Testament, and I would just read up on commentaries. It's not something that I have specifically addressed, but I guarantee that there's a lot of Christian polemics, arguing about Black Hebrew Israelites. So I don't have anything specific to add other than what I could Google.
Okay. That makes sense. I guess
in Song of Solomon?
Kind of like what Matt was saying is like if I don't have the
Song of Solomon,
I can't. You can't.
Song of Solomon is a whole book that is like not generally taken as it's taken as poetry at very least, right? It's very that's not one of the books that they take as strict literal history. So it's interesting, that one wouldn't accept that is supposed to be figurative when the whole book is filled with different euphemisms for genitalia and for breasts and for sexual acts, all described in ways that are not directly described. So I would find it weird to take the word black in that particular book and assume that one particular word means specifically what is later come to describe. Certainly, if you were to find the word for black, the Hebrew word for black, and to travel in time to 2000 BC, and you use that word, they wouldn't understand what that word means, right? Because black is a relatively new word. So this seems, man, I haven't looked into it for a single second, but this seems just historically problematic.
Right.
Well,
go ahead, Matt.
So I'm wondering, what difference does it make? So we're talking about a bunch of people who grew up in a certain area, and generally, most of the people that we would see in the Bible, we're not talking about white people. And so if Solomon describes himself poetically as dark and beautiful, just as poetry, maybe he's talking about his emotional state, but it seems to be, if you read it, it's just talking about how you look. It says, "Cover me with kisses, for your love is better than wine. Your perfume smells wonderful, but your name is sweeter than the best perfume. That is why the young women love you. Take me with you. Let's run away. The king took me into his room. We will rejoice, be happy to you. Remember, your love is better than wine. With good reason, the young women love you. Daughters of Jerusalem, I am dark and beautiful, as black as the tents of Kedar and Salma. Don't look at how dark I am, at how dark the sun has made me." Ooh, wait a minute. the sun makes you dark, that's a tan, right?
Right.
So verse 5 is talking about dark and beautiful. I don't have a problem with the notion that Solomon could have been black by any standard. But if in the very next verse it says that the sun is made Solomon dark, that doesn't seem to be the same as melanin, does it?
Right.
So if they're going to use this verse from Solomon to claim that he's the ancestor of all the Israelites, or the real true Israelites, and he talked about being dark, it's pretty straightforward that he's talking about being dark from the sun. I'm pretty sure that black Hebrew Israelites aren't dark from the sun.
That makes a lot of sense. Some of the things.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's just some of the things they say is just like clearly wrong, and I think they believe that Asian people come from Moab because there's a verse in the Bible where Jesus says Moab is my wash bin, and they link this to a stereotype that Asian people tend to own. The stereotype that says Asian people own laundromats, that's what they link it to. And I'm like, that doesn't really sound right.
Well, hopefully this is not taken as intentionally offensive, but none of us here seem to know enough about black Hebrew Israelites. I don't, if you think they've got something that's obviously false and you bring that up and that doesn't, what is your goal?
I guess for me personally, I guess sometimes just being vulnerable. Sometimes I feel like when I look at, when I try to research this as much as I can, like all I get is like, okay, there were kind of like, when I try to research it, I have this fear that it might be correct, and I'm terrified of that. And because what they'll do, they brought up how Vladimir Putin had released these pictures showing the black Jesus, and like I think that's covering like misinformation. But I just don't want to.
What's the worst case scenario? What's the worst case scenario if it was correct?
Well, they believe that well, I think they believe that black folks are going to have domination over the world when Jesus comes back. But I mean, I don't think that's a real person. So I get what you're saying.
So, like, if we could get in a time machine and we were to learn that Noah and Moses and Aaron and every hero of the Old Testament was dark-skinned, I'm not sure how that affects anyone's life right now.
That makes sense.
Like I'm not, and let's say so. Let's say that there's a group of the what we would currently consider, the people who currently identify as Jewish, right? That they've stolen that label, and they don't deserve that label. I still don't understand. That's just a label, right? And God isn't fooled. But if there really was a God, he's not fooled by people using the wrong label. So I'm super confused as to why it would matter.
It really doesn't. I think there's a psychological framework that happened with African Americans that caused this belief system to happen. But ultimately, I think we're better off with just getting into secular humanism.
Right, because if you're still a theist and still believing that some people are chosen by the God that they believe in and other people aren't, that's pretty common in all theism, right? That there's an elect of some sort based on some arbitrary criteria. And so I think I just hope you shouldn't treat it as scary. Just like I when I speak to people, so many people, about like the fear of hell is a lingering thing for people who come out of theism. You know, that you kind of need to get over that fear of, well, do you really believe that hell's a place? No, but I'm still afraid of it. It's just one of those things, and perhaps you might be in this same circumstance. Now, if you fear the repercussion, if you fear what actions your friends or these people might take, that's a reasonable fear. Just as Matt and I were describing, we fear the actions of Christian nationalists. We fear the actions of, you know, some Islamic extremists. You know, that's a reasonable fear. But if your fear is this doctrine might be correct, and yet you don't believe in a God, I just don't see how it matters.
That makes sense. I guess it's just getting rid of those last few tendencies. I guess you know, deconversion is like a. I mean, I was kind of already proud for it even when I was.
Trust me, it's hard. Like deconversion is hard, and being those lingering fear things like that lasts years for a lot of people. So I envy anyone who gets over it quickly, because I'm approaching a decade out, and I still have a lot of those traumas. So you're doing a great job. Don't worry that some of this stuff is still happening, but just try and if your main thing is fear, I guess try and figure out what the source of that fear is, and whether it's a rational fear or an irrational fear. And if it's rational fear, deal with it. And if it's irrational, use whatever coping mechanisms that work best for you. And if you need coping mechanisms, that's where maybe you look for secular therapy or some kind of support group to help you just deal with irrational fears. I don't know if that's helpful, but hopefully it is.
That's very helpful. I greatly appreciate both of you. I admire both of you. Appreciate you taking time out for my call, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. All right.
Yeah, thanks. I hope you find I wish I had better things to say about it, but I just don't. It's good luck.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Take care.
One of the things, Paul, Matt, I'm sure you do this. I'm sure you do the same thing. When I'm approached with one of the arguments against, say, you know, Jehovah's Witnesses or something, I'm like, well, I always know the other religions, they've got all the answers about why religion A always knows why religion B is wrong. It's not actually up to the atheists to need to disprove it, because the religious people have all definitely done that work. They've done the homework about, you name the religion, there's a different religion that has debunked it. So we can borrow
Atheists
and
had
work
to do
off
nothing.
of that.
Atheists had to do nothing but agree with all the other religions about why all the other religions were wrong. We're saying, you know, each religion's pointing all the other ones saying you're wrong, and we're saying correct.
That's right.
If you look up, if you do a Google for Black Hebrew beliefs debunked, which is a great way to do it, what you find is there's a bunch of different articles on this. There's an article from the Anti-Defamation League about extremist sects within the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. There's a book on Amazon.com, which I can't recommend because I think that it is a Christian book specifically responding, but it's called Black Hebrew Israelites Debunked, Deflated, and Exposed by C.L. Willis, which I'm pretty sure is a Christian book, because it says this book is a practical guide to understanding some of the Black Hebrew Israelites' fundamental teachings and how to refute them using the Bible, history, and logic. Well, I only care about refuting them using the last two in there. Let me go with facts and logic. But there's at least something there. But so there's somebody, a Christian, who's explaining why the Black Hebrew Israelites are wrong. It reminds me, I've talked about this many times, so I'll just do it real quick, and then we'll get on to our final caller for today. I was literally getting ready to debate Matt Slick. And this was a Bible and Beer Consortium event, which I genuinely love doing. So, we should do some more of those again, but I get it. It's not going to happen. There were 4 apologists standing around me, all giving their different account on the Bible and slavery. Now, somebody commented today on on a video of mine that had nothing to do with slavery to tell me how wrong I was about slavery. And they started with, a passage. I told them to call in or I would delete their comment. They did not call in, but they started by saying that I'm wrong because the Bible does speak out against slavery, except they're wrong. The first verse they cited was 1 Timothy 1, 9, and 10. And it says, we know that the law is not made for those who do what's right. It's made for those who are against the law and refuse to follow it. The law is for the sinners who are against God and all that is pleasing to him. It is for those who have no interest in spiritual things and for those who kill their fathers or mothers or anyone else. It's for those who commit sexual sins, homosexuals, those who sell slaves, those who tell lies, those who don't tell the truth and under oath. The problem is that thing there about those who sell slaves, that's a quote from the ERV. If you go to the King James, what it's described there is man stealers. The Greek word is G405, which is andrapodistus. And it's about stealing and enslaving. Now, that's as close as the Bible probably comes to saying anything negative about slavery. The problem is, this comes from my many years obsessed with board games. When you have a set of rules, new rules can override old rules, and specific rules can override general rules. But if you have an old specific rule that says you are to buy your slaves from the heathen that surround you and you can beat them as long as they don't die within a couple of days, then an updated thing later that's a word for man stealing, which is associated with slavery, is best interpreted as wrongful enslaving, as stealing individuals. It is not in any way to be understood to be a statement against all forms of slavery. If it was, then the earlier book wouldn't need to have codified exactly who you can enslave, how you can do it, and everything else. So it is a particular interpretation of that passage under a bias that means you have to ignore all of the other context, which is why, oh, damn, I don't have it here. It's why Josh Bowen wrote this great big book.
That's right.
About whether or not the Bible supports slavery. Now, that person decided not to call in. I got my Bible ready. I was going to address it all, but they decided not to call in. So, final call for today. We have from Maryland, pronouns are he, him, the cross-examiner. Welcome to the show. You're on with Paul and Matt.
Hi, Matt and Paul. Big fans. Thanks for taking my call. I'm an atheist and an attorney, and I saw the topic of the show. Big fan of yours, so I thought I'd call in to offer to give a little bit of inside baseball on what's going on with the Louisiana 10 Commandments and the Supreme Court, if people are interested.
Go for it. Go for it.
Okay, so as people heard, Louisiana governor signed the 10 Commandments bill mandating the display in all public classrooms. A lot of news stories are saying it's the first state to do this. This is not true. There was a case called Stone v. Graham back in 1980, where the Supreme Court decided 8-1 that this was unconstitutional. The only dissent there, to support your observation, Matt, was by Rehnquist. And the reason he dissented is he disagreed with the test they were using at the time. The first prong of it was, is this a strictly religious purpose for doing this? The majority said yes. Rehnquist said, no, this is historical documents. These are documents that source our history and the source of our law. Nothing could be further of the truth, from the truth, excuse me. I agree with you on that. And then jumping forward to today's court, how is this going to be analyzed? They're going to not use the same test that they used under Stone v. Graham because of the same test the same case that you cited earlier, which is the Bremerton School District case.
Yeah.
That was the death knell of what was called the Lemon test, a three-pronged test that had existed for 50 years, a half a century, that the Supreme Court used to determine whether or not a government action violated the Establishment Clause. And while they didn't officially kill it, Sotomayor, in her dissent to Bremerton, said, "This is the death of lemon," and we have no idea what's going to happen. And that's what makes the Louisiana opportunistic passage so scary. Texas tried doing this earlier in their session. They didn't because of procedural reasons. They just didn't get to the floor fast enough, but they did pass other bills like hiring pastors as counselors in schools and mandating breaks that can be used for prayer. All the school districts in the South are going to start doing this because they know this court has signaled that they have a chance. They've gotten rid of lemon because Trump did his job. Actually, it was McConnell who did the job, right? This is McConnell's court. And now is the time. Hopefully, they will find this blatantly unconstitutional again and just point to stone and not really comment on it. But given the new composition, everybody's very, very nervous. So I appreciate you bringing it up. It is a new day, and we don't know what's going to happen. I have done interviews with Freedom from Religion Foundation attorney Ryan Jane. I'm probably going to be interviewing their new special counsel, Sam Grover, this week or next on this. Everybody's perked up. They were ready to sue the instant that the pen hit paper.
Yep. I didn't reach out to Andrew Seidel because I'm already reaching out to him to get him on, and I know he's been busy, but I'm sure he's jumping in on this. And as soon as I saw the note, before I even had time to really start digging in on reading it, I already had a message saying, "Yep, ACLU, Louisiana, FFRF, Americans United. They're all they knew this was coming. They were all ready because that's their job, and they're doing great."
Yes, absolutely. I would encourage your listeners to donate to them. They need your help more than ever right now. I'm not affiliated with them, but as I described them in my interview with Ryan Jane, they are the soldiers standing watch on the wall of separation between religion and government.
Yeah, and we're going to need this more and more. Of course, the problem is, we have issues with the Supreme Court right now, not just like Alito and Thomas, but the court as a whole. We've lost for a generation or more on a number of issues, and we're fighting a politically catastrophic battle on multiple fronts. And Andrew and I talked the last time he was on here that, as absurd as I want it to feel, the notion that we could end up in a civil war is not quite as absurd as it should be. You would think we would have, one of my all-time favorite songs is a song that was by a band that used to be called Mandolin Orange, but now they're called Watch House. They wrote a song called Wildfire that's about the Civil War and racism, and it is it's if you haven't heard it, everybody should go listen. It has my favorite lyric of all time, and that is that the I'm gonna mess it up. I'll look it up in a little while. It's about the seeds of the pine when the forest burns fall, and the seeds grow the seeds grow and burn again. And it's both a reminder. Shit, now I want to look it up and get it right because I butchered it. Don't listen to me. Go listen to the song. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's a beautiful song. It's called Wildfire by Mandolin Orange, or Watch House is their new name. But in any case, the lyric is there to remind us that this too shall pass, but it's also going to happen again. We will find a way through this, which I'm no longer as confident as I used to be. I mean, you've got, with climate change issues looming, I'm not as confident about, hey, we'll find a way to pull through. But we have, once again, every election is the most important election, and it's true every single time. What's getting ready to happen in the United States is, I can't stress it enough. And yet we have this ideological battle over something that is so ridiculous and stupid. And I say that because if you just put the 10 Commandments up in every classroom, let's put it up in every classroom. Let's require every business, every private business in the United States, everyone, everywhere. If you have a storefront, you're required to put the 10 Commandments on it. If you got a public school classroom, you're required to let's put it up absolutely everywhere. And then it becomes a nothing. It's a big nothing. It's like In God We Trust on Our Money, which shouldn't fucking be there, but nobody gives a shit about it. And anybody who's dumb enough to say, look, it even says In God We Trust on Our Money, you can say, yeah, that happened in the 1950s under the Red Scare. We reacted to godless communists by doubling down, but it doesn't have anything to do with whether or not there's a God or a good reason. It doesn't have anything to do with whether the United States is founded on Christianity. It's just another thing to make the believers feel better about themselves, because we got to coddle these fuckers and make them feel special because they bought into a religion where they're supposed to feel special and they don't, because their God ain't fucking real. And so now it's up to the rest of us to make them all feel special. So let's put the 10 Commandments up absolutely everywhere, required on the hood of every car. We can make it like the General Lee, no more Confederate flags. Everybody's got to put the 10 Commandments right on top of it until it becomes an absolutely meaningless pile of crap, because that seems to be the only option I can come up with that basically says, okay, if you're going to encroach on everybody's rights and if you're going to impose this on everybody, let's just go all in. Let's stop pretending. Let's stop pretending that, the government can do this in a public school. No, fuck it. Let's do it everywhere. I think every football field should just have a 10 commandment line, a 9 commandment line, and 8 yards. We don't need to measure them anymore. We'll just put the commandments right there on the field, going both ways. And the further down the commandments you get, the closer you are to a touchdown for Jesus. It's garbage.
But I couldn't agree with your analysis more.
At the opening, I was actually wondering, what is the actual, if you're the governor, this Louisiana governor, it doesn't feel like there's an actual purpose in this other than to be a test of law elsewhere. Because, as you said, who universities really, you're going to care that in your 300-person intro to biology class that somewhere in the corner is the 10 Commandments? This doesn't feel like if you won that there's a practical purpose to this.
No, there's not. It is. I mean, the irony is really deep here. Louisiana years ago tried to make the Bible the official book of Louisiana, and that failed because they couldn't agree on which version of the Bible. And that should speak to us. Jefferson wrote, long before the Constitution, explaining why it is not right for the government to tax man to pay preachers, because even though you might be a Christian like me, I might not agree with the preacher you decide to pay as the government. And that's what we're dealing with here. Not just Christianity versus Islam or atheism. We're talking about, am I a Pentecostal? Do I subscribe to this 10 Commandments? For example, if I recall correctly, I believe there are actually 11 commandments listed in the bill because they couldn't agree on which 10 to use because different faiths use different commandments. So this is a deep issue that not too many people think about. To answer your question, I believe that the governor is doing this for votes, and they don't give a damn about the country. They don't give a damn about history. There are some bright spots on the court, believe it or not. We had a unanimous case last week where they overturned the radical Christian nationalist judge from Amarillo, Texas, and allowed the abortion pill to be approved by FDA. And just today, yesterday or last week, there was a patent case in the Supreme Court where Amy Coney Barrett took Justice Clarence to task for relying too much on historical tradition and not enough on the law. And that is kind of surprising coming from her, but it is exactly the type of argument that will defeat this bill. That they need to defeat Rehnquist's line that, hey, this is where our law comes from. So we have the oldest law we have that mimics the 10 Commandments is 500 to 800 years prior to our earliest estimates as to when the 10 Commandments were created. So Rehnquist, I agree, Matt, is full of shit. The media, if they were doing their job, would publish fact after fact after fact about how full of shit that line of argument is, because it's the only argument the conservatives are going to be able to have. This isn't religious, this is historical. So we need to be attacking as a group on every front, proving it's ahistorical. You are lying and you are preferring one document that's not even relevant. And one final point, talking about where you put these signs. Somebody brought this up. A Christian preacher in Texas, when they tried this in Texas, objected to this. And his objection was, are you telling me that my kindergarten's first question when they learn how to read is, hey, Daddy, what is adultery? And why is it on the wall of my classroom? They don't care. This is the world that they want. It's Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for calling in and giving us an update on that. On that note, I'm going to move on and bring this rigmarole stuff to an end.
Thank you.
A lot of these kids these days are boiling their goats in their mother's milk, and I will not stand for it.
Yes. How dare they? It's an absolutely wild world I find myself waking up in. And someday, don't get me wrong, I'm not miserable all the time. There are some days where I'm dealing with another thing. I have a sty on my eye, which is almost gone now, and it's just annoying. It's just people have been commenting on chat. I'm like, yes, I know what my eye looks like, but I got a show to do, and it doesn't stop me, and it doesn't hurt now, whereas it hurt the other day. Whoops, sorry, sty on my eye. It's going to make me cry. But I'm a diabetic. I'm getting ready to go have some oral surgery. I am still happy that I'm reasonably healthy. I've survived multiple heart attacks and had a triple bypass, and I'm doing, generally speaking, better than ever, but I've still got plenty of health issues. And I'd love to just wake up in the morning and say, you know what? For the next week, I got nothing to worry about but taking care of the animals and, thinking some thoughts and writing up a script and doing, a potential video and not having to worry about whether or not Louisiana has decided to try to end church-state separation. I no longer have to wake up in a world where 50% of the population thinks that reality is the opposite of what we can factually demonstrate it is. When I started seeing 49% of people thought that not just that unemployment was not, they didn't have an accurate model of unemployment, but that they thought it was at a 30-year high when it was at a 30-year low. It shows that we have access to more information than ever. And I'm not convinced it's helping.
No. Or that post-fact society they tell us about.
That is probably the saddest thing. First of all, before we get to calls, let me do a quick run through of the shows again this week. Tomorrow on Transatlantic Call-In Show at 2 p.m. Central, Josie and Luxandra will be on to host that. On the Sunday show, the 2 p.m. Sunday show will be myself and Arden Hart. Sunday show after dark is going to be Paulogia and Eric's Skeptics and Scoundrels. Next Monday's Skeptalk is going to be Aron Ra and Professor Dave. Next Tuesday's Chewed Gum is going to be Eve and Alyssa Ljub. Thank you. Whoops, I missed a note. Thank you, the Apostate Paul, for screening our calls today, and to almost all of the callers that called in today, except for the one that called in to threaten me. I don't really care about that. Super chat time. Thank you all so much. $9.99 from Greg Markowski. Thanks for the show, all you line people. Thank you so much, Greg. Greg is in first or nearly first most of the time, and it's awesome.
Are we alternating? Is that what happens?
Yeah, go for it.
Rebecca Borg, for 10, writes, is it reasonable to debate an individual theist friend on religious/supernatural beliefs versus evidence/scientific models without needing to mention a specific theist belief, e.g., the harm of religions? I think that is absolutely reasonable. I argue all the time that the one of the main problems with all religion is the epistemological problem, that if you are using an epistemology that leads you to a false belief in religious realms, that you're more likely to be making the same kind of bad mistakes in other realms of your life, and that is the harm. I argue that all the time, so obviously I think it's okay. Matt may differ.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement. If somebody calls in, it's not that I require them to have a God and defend it. For example, the Hindu caller earlier thought that they were calling in to, prove a God exists. I didn't think that was it at all. They thought that's what they had to do, and I thought, just tell me what it is, which version of Hinduism you think is true, and why. It doesn't necessarily have to. You could have a version of Hinduism that is non-theistic. Matter of fact, Buddhism, some would say, is a branch of Hinduism that is non-theistic, or branched off from Hinduism. So yeah, I don't require a specific theistic belief. I can have a discussion or debate about a number of things, but that main topic there of religious or supernatural beliefs versus evidence and scientific models, that's critical. Like, not only is it reasonable to debate a theistic friend on that, I think it's a moral duty. I mean, at least that's how I view it for me. If I've got a friend that's theistic and they're willing to have the discussion, that's important. I have some friends from my former church. I have one very lovely friend, still a believer, posts Bible verses every stinking day. And we're friends on Facebook. And so I get new Bible verses or Bible thoughts every day. I wish it would stop, but I won't unfollow them. And I won't have a conversation with them about their beliefs unless they tell me they want to. I take incoming calls on the show. We invite people to call in. I don't go door to door. And I'm not going to go to my old friends and say, hey, I just want you to know, I don't believe anymore. And here's why I think you shouldn't. Because I couldn't do that. I need them to tell me why they believe and whether or not they think anybody else should believe for those same reasons before I can address anything. Because if in fact there is a God who's privately revealed himself to that person, there's nothing I could say that could or should change their mind about that. Just, I know what Arden and I talked about before the show. You don't. You're not going to convince me I'm wrong about what, I suppose you could. I suppose you could convince me I'm wrong about what Arden and I talked about. If you got Arden to come in and say, yeah, that's not what we talked about.
Right.
And I have to recognize, wow, memory is faulty. That's just a fundamental reality. But I don't think there's very many conversations that are maybe more important than the one you're talking about, Rebecca. So yeah, go for it. Thank you so much for the donation. $20 from Godfrey and Good. Aloha, mahalo, aloha, aloha. And by the way, huge happy Pride Month and happy Juneteenth. I'm genuinely sorry. I know we had Mandisa on not too long ago. I don't want to just have my black friends on to, we're going to talk about black stuff. And so if anybody's bothered at all that on Juneteenth, there's two boring ass white dudes here, I hope you went off and watched something else, because it just happened to fall on Wednesday. But thank you, Godfrey.
$10 from Monkey at Typewriter. Paul, a fairly average coffee table is 40 inches by 60 inches or 16.67 square feet. The average property value in Nova Scotia outside Halifax is $96 per square feet. So tell Shannon a coffee table costs $1,600 more than sticker. Okay. Well, I will pass that along. I doubt that is going to be an effective argument, but I will see if the pragmatism weighs in. And I appreciate you being on my side on this, Monkey Typewriter. That's great.
The problem is that I don't know if those prices are in Canadian dollars or US dollars, but you get to take the coffee table with you if you sell the house. So you don't get to include the coffee table in the price of the house. So there's your argument is logically flawed here, Monkey at Typewriter.
Also, the square foot is not how the Canadians would deal with it. So that's how I was getting confused. And also, I don't know if you translate it into Canadian dollars. We'll see. The argument, the numbers may not be correct, but we'll figure all that out.
I will say that I don't disagree with Paul about the coffee table, because every time I look at, I just completely cleaned and reorganized the entire downstairs, moved out 5 bookshelves in order to put in shelving for reptile enclosures and stuff like that. And we have tons more space down there now than we had before. And there's a coffee table there. But genuinely, the coffee table is just far enough away from the couch that it's not even really convenient to set drinks and stuff on when you're sitting at the couch. Because then you couldn't, do any reclining.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes a catch-all for books and mail and whatever else. The living room would look emptier without the coffee table, but it would definitely be less cluttered, and that can be a good thing.
I admit that my position only makes sense if you are anti-clutter. If you do not care about clutter, then my position is probably irrational.
I could get rid of our coffee table, and you would still walk in the house, even on its cleanest day, and go, "Ooh, this is a little more clutter than I want."
Yeah.
Was
You
this
get
me?
to read this one.
Yes,
Yep.
$10 from Matt Glass. Matt looks more like James Randi every time I see him. Well, thank you. James Randi, Dan Dennett. I'll take it all.
Canadian, $13.99 from Tank Al-Safi. Pardon me, Tarek Al-Safi. Killing a healthy baby is not an action that should be taken by a perfectly moral being. 2, the biblical God drowned every baby in the world. Therefore, the biblical God isn't a perfectly moral being. I would have to agree with that on all points.
And I will. Fuck. So here's the thing. If a being was perfectly moral and there was any moral justification for killing every baby, drowning every baby in the world, then a perfectly moral being could do that. One of the things is, like, you could look at it in the same way that you could say a perfectly moral being could never take a knife and slice someone's throat open. And yet doctors do that to perform a tracheotomy. So if there is a circumstance under which it is morally permissible to slice a throat open, then under those circumstances, it's not immoral. If there are circumstances under which it's not immoral to drown every baby in the world, then a perfectly moral being could do that. The problem here is that generally, if you ask me or anybody else, it seems very difficult to come up with a circumstance under which it would be morally permissible to drown every baby in the world. But if you are the God of the universe with complete control over life and death, and this earth is just a temporary vessel that your soul inhabits, and it's truly the soul that matters, then that God could drown every baby on the planet in order to release all their souls to a better world. And you could legitimately view that as doing the rough equivalent of a soul tracheotomy. I think that it needs a lot of evidence to back it all up. And I'm with you, Tariq, that the default view of this is that God that drowned every baby is a repugnant fuck. Not necessarily because I can't think of what the justification is, but because I don't know what the justification is for allowing them to be born in the first place, knowing you were going to do that to them. That's what fundamentally changes this. It's not like, oh, I didn't realize that the babies were going to have problems and now we need to release their souls to heaven. Nah, you knew all this from before you made anything. You sat there and you considered options. This is one model of God, that God chose which universe he was going to make, knowing everything that was going to happen, and just decided that, it all comes out in the wash, including drowning everybody.
That's the arguments I made last Sunday, was that a perfectly moral God wouldn't have created, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
$10 from William Mattis. My new God is my DM. Because if she gets mad, I have to do battle with a sentient mountain elder earth titan. Well, y'all have a good day. Good health to you both. Coffee table money. Literally, I was like, what's William mean by DM? But it's It's legitimately Dungeon Master. Okay.
Yeah. This is a D&D reference.
No. I think it's often wise, at least when you're in the same room, to worship your Dungeon Master. Unless they don't want you to.
$4.99 from Cessna Pilot. Over here living the coffee table-less life. It's pretty great. 10 out of 10. Would recommend. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Great seeing you on Sunday. And I don't know what IGH is.
That's your gay homie.
PCL. Oh, your gay homie. Perfect.
YGH is your gay homie.
Also,
love it.
Normally $5 is not accepted on the show to be read, but Cessna Pilot sent an extra $5 to bump it up. So to people watching, before you send $5, keep that in mind.
No, don't tell them that, honey. They can send the $5 and then you tell them, and then they have to send another $5.
Well, it's the same.
Well, I think
yeah.
I think that is what she said.
But yeah. See, here we go. Here's $5 from William Mattis. When you two were Christian, were you all in the once saved, always saved crowd? Jesus saves and grants +2 damage to all attack rolls. I'm absolutely in. I was in the once saved, always saved crowd. The problem is that anybody who falls away clearly wasn't saved to begin with. They were one of the many who would say, "Lord, Lord," and he would say, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." So,
yeah.
I did have a pastor friend that still thinks he's going to see me in heaven because he believes I was genuinely saved and that is a forever thing. And I'm like, how weird is it going to be? First of all, if I get to heaven and he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But if we both end up in heaven, living next door to each other, and he spent his whole life preaching something he couldn't prove, and I spent half of my life, or more than half of it, let's hope I live that long, shitting all over the absurdity of believing that stuff without sufficient evidence. And yet we're in mansions just down the street from each other.
I've had Christians express the exact same thing. Absolutely. $10 from Daniel Rowe Bless. Thank you so much for the donation. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Daniel.
The line only works with your support. So we appreciate it.
Daniel, I met in Florida. By the way, on that once saved, always saved thing, there's a crap. I forgot what I was going to say. So we'll move on to super chats. $10 from William Mattis. Last one. Won some lottery money today. That's why the supers burnt myself with my roux the other night. Definitely going to scar. Ooh. Was that near dark chocolate in color? I'm okay though, just clumsy. Well, I'm glad you're going to be okay. Please.
Well, that's an extraordinary claim, William, that you won the lottery. So I will need extraordinary evidence of your extraordinary claim. No, I would just need regular evidence. The deposit in your account would be good enough.
Yeah, I will accept that you won some lottery money and gave us part of it. I won lottery money just the other day, $4. When it gets up over like 500 or 600 million, all of a sudden all my math skills go out the window, and I buy a ticket anyway, because it's like, I think after it gets to like 500 million, the expected return on a dollar is like $1.20 or something like that.
I only do that for in Canada. We have these things called 50-50 draws, and they're generally tied to charities and to sports. But the recent ones around here, around the Stanley Cup, have gone up to like 3 million a night. And so I don't mind doing that because I know that at least half my money is going to a charity I would endorse. Anyway.
Yep.
$10 from Chris. Arden and Matt, it was so nice meeting you on Saturday. Thanks for teaching me about snakes and showing me that they're not that scary after all. You're a gay homie. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy.
Thanks, Chris. It was very nice to meet you. When I say, we did that Bayou Country Exotics show in Richland Hills, which is just kind of northeast side of Fort Worth. And Saturday was not a great day. We sold like one gecko, and foot traffic was really week, and there weren't a lot of vendors there. There's a lot of potential problems with this show, but we're cautiously optimistic on trying another show with them. But the best thing of the weekend was Chris came by Saturday along with several other people, because I'd mentioned it on the show very briefly. And then on Sunday, which was Father's Day, we were like, is anybody going to show up? Is this going to be a good kind of dad's Father's Day out, or are they going to let dad stay home? The traffic actually picked up, and there were several people who showed up and bought and or traded snakes. But there was, I don't know, 10 or 12, maybe 15 different people who all showed up because they heard about it on the show and came over to talk and visit and learn about the snakes and talk about their snakes and get pictures and stuff like that. So yeah, it's good stuff. I love weekends where we get to do reptile shows. $10 Canadian from Jessica Gallagher. This is for Paul. Please put this toward the coffee table, signed a fan of Shannon.
Okay.
He's gonna have like a warehouse full of coffee tables and none in the house.
I guess that's maybe what we need to do. We have outdoor coffee tables. Maybe we can worry about that. $20 from Mr. Mister. Please briefly discuss Project 2025 and how it will destroy our democracy, country, and constitution. Thank you for your Navy service, Matt. I served from 88 through 2012. We must stop this.
So first of all, thank you. I was in from 87 to 2005 or so. Just a little over 8 years. I'm not going to go into Project 2025 tonight because I'm planning on doing a show on it as we get slightly closer to the election. I was going to maybe talk about it a little bit in the last show of the month, but I'm going to end up skipping that last show. And also it was going to be Dara, and I don't want to saddle a guest from Ireland with American politics. And so probably the July 3rd show, I will probably cover Project 2025 then, because that's the day before Independence Day in the United States, 4th of July. So that makes more sense. Thank you so much for the donation. And it's coming, and I agree. This needs to be stopped. However, I will say in advance, a good chunk of Project 2025 is just exercising basic freedom, the same basic freedom that anybody, we could have a Project 2025 sucks thing where we just are actively working to stop anything and everything they do. We really need to get into what they're advocating and what the dangers are. And I'm looking to potentially have Andrew Seidel on at some point to do that. So thank you, Mr. Mister. Oh yeah, this one's me. Or no, this one's you.
No, I read I read the Project 2025. Not that it matters that much.
Pull her out.
Yeah, it's fine. I'll try.
Still settling in.
So 999 from Jamnico6. Here's a super chat to see Lydia, and that's really good timing. So I'm gonna try. And where is she right now?
Right there. See if I can get it close. Like maybe arachnophobia trigger warning. She's not really popping up. She's right here. Oh, there you go. You can kind of see her. Right there.
It's just not focusing well. If we can.
There's a glare.
I need something. Here, you hold it up to camera. I will hold this thing up behind it, and as long as
green.
I know,
it's gonna be a problem.
But it may not be the right green, and it may make it so that it can actually focus on that.
You can kind of see her at the top there. She's it's not really focusing. I'm trying to get. There we go. She's still really tiny. When she's been around,
show off the enclosure real quick.
This was made by a fan of the show, actually. So, shout out to Terry from I'm blanking on the name.
Sam's
Spectacular Spoods or something like that. Sam's who she was working with, but yeah, it's this cool little bottom opening enclosure, so that way you're not ruining the web every time you.
Yeah, we'll try and show it off. There's a little snake down in there, skull. There's a mirror. Yeah, very cool. I did not. We joked about it, and I was like, "Yeah, we don't need a spider. We don't need a spider." And then we both held the spider, and I was like, we're going to end up with a spider. There's just no way not to.
I've loved spiders all my life, so that I don't even understand arachnophobia.
Yeah, I'm definitely no longer. Well, I don't know that I was ever truly arachnophobic, but I did not like spiders. Didn't care about spiders. That's definitely changed. And actually, I was looking at a pumpkin tarantula the other day that I might end up getting at some point. We'll see. We are frequently next to another vendor that does spiders, and I'll check on what they've got.
I was definitely afraid of birds, though, for a long, long time, until I became an atheist and learned about evolution and discovered, for some reason, like me figuring out that birds are really dinosaurs made me like fall in love with birds now. So it's weird how phobias and all those things are always irrational. But
Oh, also, Terry's actually in chat right now. It's Spood Obsessed. Go check out Terry from Spood Obsessed. She's on Instagram. She's wonderful. Thank you so much for the gift, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. I am so glad Terry's in chat. That's great. We had a
$10
really good time.
$10 from William Matz. Fun fact, cannibalism isn't illegal in the US. You can't really legally obtain human flesh meat, but yeah.
Fun fact, the Libertarian Party of Texas tried to include legal cannibalism in their party platform one year. I was just absolutely dumbfounded. But yeah, so glad you're in chat, Terry. And they helped make there was periods of the weekend where we were like, we're at the wrong show. And I'll explain, my apologies. Let me explain this just real quick. We keep and breed exotic pets. We have 10 different species of snakes and 6 different species of lizard right now, because we just added a Rankin's dragon that we rescued, which we're hoping it makes it. It's incredibly thin. But we go to these expos, and most of the ones we go to are primarily about sales. It is a place you go, and you're like 70% of the people going there are going with the intent of potentially purchasing something, and 30% are there to, ooh, I get to go see reptiles and all kinds of stuff, and maybe get to handle stuff with some, but I'm not really looking to buy. It's a good thing to take the kids to on the weekend. They get to see a wide variety of animals, and you don't necessarily have to take any home. This show was basically the opposite. Arden was pointing this out, because they're starting off by selling experiences, like, hey, you can come hang out with this wallaby and this armadillo and these birds. Then the other thing they were doing is, most of the shows we do are primarily reptiles and invertebrates. This was a lot of dogs and a lot of birds. And so, even with Epic Loot Exotics, I mean, the most expensive snake that I had there, I had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them that were about $2,000 a piece. And we weren't expecting anybody to necessarily buy those, because those are only going to be really desirable to vendors looking to create more snakes. They've got the right genes in them. But there were people selling dogs for $3,500, $4,000. There were people selling birds for $4,000. And so, there were people showing up who had money to buy stuff, but it was more about 70% of people were coming for an experience, and 30% or so were coming to shop. And there was a lot of time we spent there thinking, are we even at the right place? Did we drive and get a hotel and set up and show off all the gorgeous snakes we made, only to, lose money on the whole thing? And by the time Sunday rolled around and we realized that we were going to, actually break even, I didn't care, because the people that we got to hang out with there, both the fans of the show who showed up, and everybody else, I mean, they made it, Terry made it really fun right from the minute we got there. And so we were just happy to get to spend the weekend doing something we love. That's not this. Don't get me wrong. I love doing this too. I know people don't always get that. I had somebody in a chat the other day just kind of pissed me off. They're like, would you still be doing this if you weren't getting paid for it? And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? When I had a full-time job, I burned all my vacation and my entire life savings to do this for free, and then to travel around. Of course I'd still do it if I wasn't getting paid for it. I did it that way for most of the time I did this. you know, I have a mission. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy to be getting paid for it. And on that note, a huge thank you to everybody who engaged with the super chats here.
I did comic book conventions for 20 years, nearly 20 years. The conventions is what I wouldn't do for free. I wouldn't do those. A lot of work. Fun to
$20
meet
from
everybody,
Dante.
but a lot of work. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it was huge fun to meet everybody. $20 from Dante Verona, another discount or another disconnect from reality. H.W. Bush, W. Bush, and Trump were our last three Republican presidents. They all left office in economic ruin, yet people still believe the myth that somehow Republicans are good for the economy. I know. I don't know that economic ruin is accurate for Trump. It was an unusual presidency because also COVID impacted things. And so while there were financial problems, I don't know that he left it in economic ruin. But yeah, point taken.
$9.99 from Wesley Commons. Thank you so much, Wesley. We appreciate you.
I don't think it's fair that Paul gets the easy ones like that. $9.99 from I Am Conrad. In your opinions, what is the strongest argument against, quote, that's the old covenant, we're under the new covenant talking point I constantly see online from Christian apologists? I did an entire video called, But That's the Old Testament. But the short answer is this. You don't get to throw out the old covenant because the Old Testament is all where every prophecy about Jesus is. It's where the creation and the fall and all of that comes from. So you don't get to just completely toss it out. But let's assume for a second you did. Why did it exist in the first place? Why was there an old covenant? Why couldn't we just have the right covenant from the get-go? What kind of failure is God at communicating his needs and desires? The Bible is nothing but a chronicle of God's failures. He creates two people, it goes wrong. Matter of fact, watch the Why Won't You Love Me talk that I did in Sydney, Australia. It goes through from God. I basically wear a bathrobe and act as God. Paul, what are your thoughts on Old Covenant, New Covenant stuff?
Matthew 5:17. Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth passed away, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, which is the famous jot and tittle, which is I prefer that version, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Jesus himself does not provide this new covenant theology that most Christians want to use. $10 from Acrisol. We live in a world with more information and availability than ever, and yet people still won't even people won't even be fucked to pick up their phone and look up something basic. It's frustrating. Yeah,
it is.
It is frustrating.
Except that that's not true. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, Chris. On your point is good. How many times have you been out to dinner with several people and somebody will raise a question or an issue and be incredibly confident and disagree with somebody else at the table, and somebody at the table, one of those or somebody else, will actually pull up their phone and see if they can get the facts? I did that just the other night. I did it Saturday night, pulling up facts to debunk somebody's opinion. And yet, if we weren't there, that person would have just kept on expressing that opinion. And actually they're probably going to anyway, because we've got this whole, the facts don't care about your feelings and my feelings don't care about your facts stuff potentially going on. But if people will do it, it's just, they don't always do it on their own. It's like they won't look up to try to correct themselves. And I think that may be the key difference between not completely, but a good chunk of the skeptic community, the people that you find out, are activists who are advocating for critical thinking. We're the ones who will pull up a Google search to try to prove ourselves wrong. Not all the time, but more often than probably the others do.
I'm grateful to live in this time, because if I'd have been doing my search to prove Christianity true in the 70s, all I would have been able to find is, more than a carpenter and very terrible books that I wouldn't have been able to fact check those. So I find the internet age was very a key in my deconversion and probably a lot of people's. So it's not universally true.
Yeah, you used to have to go to the library and then learn how a card catalog worked and learn how the Dewey Decimal System worked, and then hope that there was a book in your library that addressed the subject you wanted. It was a good chunk of libraries where here's a bunch of research books and an Encyclopedia Britannica, and then a fiction section with stuff for the kids to do while they're there.
Mm-hmm.
Not all libraries were created equal. And now I share your frustration, Crazel, of not being, they won't be fucked to pick up their phone and look up something basic. I think there's a suspicion that we know so much now and we have so much access to information that I think it plays into a mindset that says, oh, if I was wrong, I would have already heard it. It would have already been proved. It would have already been, be obvious. It would be on the news. And then there's the biases of, well, you can't trust the news. You can't trust the source. There's a conspiracy everywhere. The government lies. Everybody lies. It's all lies. As a protective mechanism so that you don't have to fear being left out and confused. $10 from ZQs. I wonder how many smart aleck kids are going to vandalize these displays by adding the rest of the second commandment to them and the punishment it prescribes to those who break it. I don't know what you mean, because the Decalogue exists without anything specific for the second one. What am I missing?
I'm not sure either.
So it's Exodus 20. I'm the Lord thy God that brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is heaven, earth, or that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. That's the second one, and it stops there without prescribing. Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not sure from the Watchtower. I don't know. That's talking about bringing punishment on the third and fourth generations, but that's not a Bible version I'm used to. So I'm not sorry. I'm so sorry, Zacuse. You may have to clarify for us what you meant. But
yeah, I mean, the Ten Commandments appear, and there's not only multiple different versions of the Decalogue. There's a different one depending on which Bible you're actually reading, but because it's Exodus 20 and then also 34, and then somewhere they're mentioned Deuteronomy. So maybe that's where the actual punishment is. So we'll leave it there. Because I can't remember all of it and can't be fucked to look it up.
Yeah, sorry about
that. $10.
Oh, this is you. That's you. Go ahead. I don't know whose it is.
$10 from Dustin Gonzalez. Cool to see you all at the expo, at the Exotics Expo. Y'all's plus 1,000 aura stun locked me, but I had a blast with my daughter. I hope you got a kick out of the insurrection coin. I did, in fact. I have it. I meant to show it to Aron and forgot. Yeah, I have. Dustin gave me an encased in plastic commemorative Trump insurrection coin. If I had it up here by me, I would show it to you right now. But yeah. Thanks so much, Dustin. I appreciate it.
$10 from Alias Hana Silverbow. I'm sorry, and I apologize mean the same thing, except at a funeral. Okay.
Oh, that's really good. Oh, yeah. I apologize.
Oh. Wow. Yeah.
I got kicked out of a funeral for saying how sorry I was. $10 from Mo Scoville. Great show. I wish I liked scales. both on animals and the ones that tell me my weight. Keep up the great work. I tolerate scales more than I used to. Oh, by the way, I know that on last week's show, I started off and then rewound and restarted the show with a different rant where I was basically saying, if you're using, Manjaro and stuff for legitimate health reasons, cool, including weight loss, cool. But if you're one of the people who are gaming the system so you can get Manjaro and whatever else so that this summer you can wear a slightly smaller bikini, stop fucking doing that because I need my meds. That was last Wednesday. 2 days later, they called to say that my prescription was ready. So I have my drugs at least for the next month. We will probably have to go through that many, many more times. Paul, what projects have you got going up? When do you and I get to do something together again?
Oh, well, we with something together again. That definitely opens up. I can start working on that. I was actually wondering. I did a response to your and Than's debate as well, and I was actually wondering if down the road there was something to be done there. But we'll figure that out. As Matt mentioned, I had Satan on today. I don't know if I can get a bigger guest than Satan. Present company excluded, of course. But maybe next I got to work on getting God on the show. We'll see.
Well, I do recommend if any of you haven't checked out Satan's Guide to the Bible, I recommend giving it a view. And I also recommend don't take everything that it says at face value. There are things there that may not be correct, that may be exaggerated. And you should do the same with anything and everything that Paul and I put out in videos, and especially anything and everything that we do live. At least when we're doing videos, there's some amount of due diligence to make sure we've looked stuff up. When we're on the live shows, like, okay, I pulled up 10 Commandments real quick here. I had a couple of different windows open because I try to find information so that I'm not just, talking out of my butt. But the key to skepticism is not cynicism. It's not everything's bullshit. It's everything could be bullshit. Let me look into it. Skepticism is about not holding anything sacred so that it goes unquestioned. That goes for anything and everything I've ever said, anything and everything that anyone we know or don't know has ever said. That is how you exercise critical thinking, to try to make sure that you believe as many true things and as few false things as possible, that you are not the one that is falling for stuff. And remember, the second you think you can't be fooled, it's too late. Every single one of us can be, has been, and will be fooled again. It's kind of there with the absurdity, in my view, of saying that Christians get to a point where they don't sin. Skeptics don't get to the point where they don't make mistakes. That's not what skepticism is. This goal of wanting to be accurate in your thoughts, to have good models of thinking so that you are less likely to be fooled, so that the impact of being fooled is weakened. That's what the key to skepticism is. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks to Aron for producing. Thanks to Paul for agreeing to come on and do a show with me again. I always love it when Paul's here. Go check out his video on the YouTube creationists or YouTube Christians that are trying and failing, I guess, to counter Satan's view on the Bible in large part. And don't forget about all the other shows coming out this week. Huge thank you to our moderators. I see I Got Cookies and Monkey at Type. I feel like I should have like the romper room thing. I see I Got Cookies and Monkey at Typewriter and Calassia 789 all there in the chat. And I see Billy and Jason and Captain Red Bull and El Hassan and William Mattis.
They never said my name. You think Paul is a common enough name that I would have got the romper room thing today?
Oh, I'm definitely gonna see. Now I'm gonna end up going through and searching until I find the episode where she may have said Paul and done that. In the meantime, thanks to all of our producers, our patron producers, patreon.com/calltheline. You can also go to linemerch.com and buy stuff. It's one of many ways to support the channel, and including like, subscribe, and join the channel right now. We'll see you next time.